What if the secrets to a truly restorative night's sleep weren't found in a pill, but in the timeless wisdom of ancient Greece? Imagine drifting off as the wisdom of these philosophers guide you through profound questions about existence and virtue. This isn't just a sleep aid. It's an invitation to unlock deeper reflection while your mind finds its most peaceful state. Imagine for a moment that you're standing on a quiet street in ancient Athens, long after the sun has set. The air is warm and still. Most of the city has retreated indoors. Oil lamps flicker gently in windows, casting soft amber light onto stone walls that have stood for generations. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the faint murmur of the Aegean Sea, its waves rolling steadily against the shore as they have for thousands of years. This is a different kind of night. There's no rush here, no urgency. Time moves at its own pace in this ancient world, unhurried and patient. The marble columns of temples catch the moonlight, glowing pale against the dark sky. Gardens are fragrant with herbs and night-blooming flowers. The streets, usually bustling with merchants and citizens debating in the agora, are now empty and peaceful. In a place like this, philosophy wasn't locked away in dusty books or reserved for scholars in ivory towers. It was something people carried with them, like a companion walking alongside them through life. Philosophy was in the conversations at symposiums, in the questions posed while walking through olive groves, in the quiet moments before sleep when the mind begins to wander. The ancient Greeks didn't always treat philosophy as a formal discipline with rigid answers. Sometimes, it was simply the art of wondering. What makes a life worth living? What does it mean to truly rest, not just the body, but the mind itself? These weren't questions meant to be solved quickly or definitively. They were questions to sit with, to return to again and again, like visiting an old friend. Picture yourself now in one of those quiet courtyards, perhaps in the garden of the academy that Plato founded, or near the Lyceum where Aristotle taught his students while walking slowly beneath covered pathways. The night air is cool. Stone benches worn smooth by countless thoughtful people offer a place to sit. You're not here to debate or to prove anything. You're simply here to listen, to consider, to let your thoughts unfold naturally. What did the ancient philosophers think about when they couldn't sleep? Did Socrates, wandering the streets of Athens, pause to look up at the stars and wonder about his place in the vastness of things? Did Plato, after a long day of teaching, sit quietly and reflect on what it means to live well, to cultivate virtue, to understand oneself? There's something deeply calming about connecting with these ancient questions. They remind us that humans have always wondered about the same essential things. Thousands of years separate us from those Athenian nights, yet the questions remain surprisingly familiar. What is a good life? Not in the sense of wealth or status, but in the deeper sense, what makes existence meaningful, fulfilling, worth the effort? The Greeks had a word for this kind of good life, eudaimonia. It's often translated as happiness, but it means something richer than momentary pleasure. It suggests a life lived in accordance with what's best in us, a kind of flourishing, like a garden that receives just the right amount of sunlight and rain. But what does that flourishing look like? How do we cultivate it? These questions don't demand immediate answers. In fact, perhaps their value lies in the asking itself, in the gentle contemplation they invite. The ancient philosophers understood that wisdom wasn't about collecting facts or winning arguments. It was about learning to see clearly, to think carefully, to live deliberately. And what about rest? What does it mean to truly rest the mind? In our modern world, we often think of rest as simply stopping, as ceasing activity. But the Greeks recognized something subtler. True rest might involve a kind of peaceful contemplation, allowing thoughts to settle like silt in water, revealing clarity beneath. Aristotle spoke of different types of knowledge and different types of activity. Some activities exhaust us, others replenish us. Some thoughts agitate the mind, others bring it into harmony. Perhaps resting the mind isn't about forcing it into blankness, but about guiding it toward thoughts that bring peace rather than turmoil. In the schools of Athens, learning often happened while walking. Aristotle's followers were called the peripatetics, the walkers, because they would stroll through covered colonnades while discussing ideas. There was something about gentle movement, about being in rhythm with the body, that seemed to help the mind find its natural pace. Even Socrates, who spent much of his time in the bustling marketplace engaging citizens in dialogue, understood the value of stillness. There are accounts of him standing motionless for hours, lost in thought, contemplating a single question. His students would find him in the same spot, dawn turning to dusk, his mind turned entirely inward. Tonight, in this ancient Greek world we're imagining, there's no pressure to solve anything. You're simply a visitor to this timeless space where philosophy lives and breathes in the night air. The questions are there, patient and enduring, waiting for anyone who wishes to consider them. They don't insist on answers. They simply invite you to wonder, to explore, to drift through ideas as you might drift through a peaceful dream. The distant sea continues its eternal rhythm. The oil lamps burn steadily. And somewhere in this ancient city, philosophy waits as a gentle companion, ready to walk with you through whatever thoughts arise, asking nothing more than your open and curious presence. In ancient Greece, philosophy often took the form of dialogue. Not the kind of dialogue we might think of today, filled with debate and the need to win an argument, but something softer, more exploratory. These were conversations between friends, between teachers and students, between curious minds who gathered simply to think together. Plato, one of the most influential philosophers of Athens, understood this deeply. He didn't write treatises that declared absolute truths from on high. Instead, he wrote dialogues, conversations between characters, most often featuring his teacher Socrates. These dialogues unfolded like gentle walks through ideas, pausing here to examine a thought, wandering there to consider another perspective. Imagine sitting in on one of these conversations. The setting might be a shaded colonnade on a warm afternoon, or perhaps a quiet room as evening settles in. Socrates is there, not as a lecturer standing above his audience, but as a participant, sitting among equals. His voice is calm, unhurried. He asks questions, but not to test or to trap. He asks because he genuinely wants to explore, to see where the conversation might lead. There's no pressure in these dialogues. No one is expected to have the right answer immediately, or even at all. The participants speak when they feel moved to speak. They fall silent when they need time to think. Sometimes the dialogue circles back to where it started. Sometimes it ventures into unexpected territory. The destination matters less than the journey itself, the shared experience of thinking together. Aristotle, who studied with Plato for 20 years, carried forward this spirit of gentle inquiry, though his approach was somewhat different. Where Plato often explored through mythical stories and abstract ideals, Aristotle was drawn to the natural world, to careful observation, to understanding things as they are. Yet both shared a fundamental respect for the process of thinking itself, for taking time, for not rushing toward conclusions. When Aristotle taught at the Lyceum, his own school in Athens, he would walk with his students through the peripatos, the covered walkways. Their feet moved in steady rhythm as their minds moved through ideas. There was something about this combination, the body gently active while the mind explored, that seemed to create the right conditions for thought. These weren't lectures where students frantically took notes, afraid to miss some crucial piece of information. They were conversations, organic and flowing. A student might raise a question. Aristotle would consider it, perhaps turn it over, examine it from different angles. Other students would contribute their thoughts. Ideas would build upon ideas, not in competition but in cooperation. What's remarkable about this approach is how it invites us to simply listen. Not to understand everything immediately, not to memorize or to master, but just to be present with the ideas as they unfold. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates often ends up admitting that he doesn't know the final answer to the question they've been exploring. And that's perfectly acceptable. The value was in the exploration itself, in the willingness to wonder. Think about what it might feel like to participate in such a dialogue. There's a gentleness to it, a safety. You're not going to be judged if you don't grasp something right away. You're not going to be tested on your retention. You're simply invited to listen, to consider, to let the ideas wash over you like waves on a shore. Some ideas might catch your attention. Others might drift past. Both experiences are valid. This is important to remember as we continue through these ancient thoughts together. There's nothing you need to do. No effort required, no mental strain. You're not here to become an expert in Greek philosophy or to analyze arguments. You're simply here, present, allowing these ancient voices to speak softly in the background of your awareness. Plato and Aristotle, along with Socrates before them, created a tradition of philosophy as companionship. Philosophy wasn't meant to be a solitary struggle with difficult texts. It was meant to be a shared journey, a conversation that welcomes everyone, regardless of their background or expertise. The academy and the lyceum weren't just schools. They were communities, gardens where people could gather and think together in peace. In the quiet of this ancient world, these dialogues continue. They're not demanding your attention aggressively. They're simply there, like the sound of the sea in the distance, like the flicker of oil lamps, like the cool stone beneath your feet. You can engage with them as much or as little as you wish. You can let your mind wander to them and away from them, following its own natural rhythm. The philosophers understood something essential about the human mind. It doesn't always work best when forced or pressured. Sometimes it needs space, gentleness, permission to simply be. In dialogue, in conversation, in the slow unfolding of ideas shared between people who trust each other, the mind finds a kind of ease. It discovers thoughts it didn't know it had. It makes connections naturally, without strain. Socrates believed that learning wasn't about pouring knowledge into an empty vessel. He thought of it more like helping someone remember what they already, in some sense, knew. His method was to ask questions that guided people toward their own insights, their own understanding. He trusted that the wisdom was already there, waiting to be gently coaxed into awareness. So as these ancient voices speak, as Plato and Aristotle and Socrates share their thoughts across the centuries, let yourself simply receive them. There's no test coming, no requirement to remember. You're safe here in this space where philosophy is not a challenge but a comfort, not a demand but an invitation. The dialogue continues, gentle and patient, waiting for you whenever you're ready to listen. As we move deeper into this ancient world, something begins to shift. The ideas we encounter don't need to be held tightly. They're not meant to be grasped or captured. They're more like clouds drifting across an evening sky, changing shape as they move, eventually dissolving into the darkness. The ancient philosophers knew something about the nature of thought. They understood that the mind has different modes, different rhythms. During the day, we might engage with ideas actively, turning them over, examining them closely. But as evening comes, as the body prepares for rest, the mind can relate to thoughts differently. It can let them soften. Plato spoke of different states of consciousness, different ways of knowing. There's the sharp, analytical thinking we use to solve problems or make decisions. But there's also a more receptive state, where we simply allow impressions to arise and fade. Neither is better than the other. They serve different purposes at different times. Right now, in this moment, you don't need the analytical mind. You don't need to figure anything out or remember anything specific. The ideas we've touched upon, the dialogues, the questions about the good life, about rest, they can all begin to blur at the edges. Like ink dissolving in water. Like footprints on a beach slowly erased by incoming waves. Aristotle observed the natural world carefully, and he noticed how things move in cycles. Day into night. Wakefulness into sleep. Activity into stillness. These transitions are natural, necessary. The mind, like the body, needs to release its daytime tension, to soften its focus, to prepare for renewal. Everything in nature follows these rhythms. As you listen now, you might notice thoughts arising. Perhaps thoughts about what you heard earlier. Perhaps thoughts about your own day. Perhaps thoughts about nothing in particular. Whatever arises, you can let it pass. You don't need to follow it or develop it or do anything with it. Thoughts are like visitors passing through. You can acknowledge them gently and let them continue on their way. The Greek philosophers often used the metaphor of flowing water. Heraclitus, one of the earlier thinkers, said that you cannot step into the same river twice. The water is always moving, always changing. Thoughts are like this too. They flow through consciousness, never quite the same from moment to moment. You don't need to dam the river. You can simply watch it flow. Simply observe without interfering. In the schools of Athens, at the end of the day, as the oil lamps were lit and the evening grew quiet, there would have been a natural winding down. The intense discussions would soften. Voices would become quieter. People would begin to turn inward, preparing for rest. The transition from day to night was honored, respected, allowed to unfold at its own pace. This is the rhythm we're entering now. The ideas don't disappear, but they become less distinct. The boundaries soften. What seemed important to understand fully can now just be present, without the need for comprehension. Understanding can wait. Or it doesn't need to happen at all. Socrates sometimes spoke of wisdom as knowing that you don't know. There's a kind of peace in that. A release from the burden of needing to have everything figured out. You can rest in uncertainty. You can be comfortable with questions that have no immediate answers. You can let the questions themselves drift away. As your body settles, as your breathing becomes slower and deeper, the mind naturally follows. It doesn't need direction. It knows how to soften on its own. You're not forcing anything. You're simply allowing what wants to happen naturally. The body has its own wisdom about rest. The mind does too. The ancient world around you becomes even quieter now. The streets of Athens are empty. The distant sea is a soft, rhythmic sound. The oil lamps flicker more slowly, their flames barely moving in the still air. Everything is winding down, preparing for the deep stillness of night. The whole city breathes more slowly. And the thoughts, whatever they are, they can wind down too. They can become less insistent, less demanding of your attention. They're welcome to be there, but they don't need to be at the center. They can drift to the edges of awareness. They can become like background music, present but not requiring focus. Plato wrote about the world of forms, perfect ideals that exist beyond our everyday perception. But he also understood that here, in this physical world, things are softer, less defined. Shadows and light blend together. Clear distinctions fade. And that's exactly right for this moment. This is a time for blending, not for sharp boundaries. You might find that your attention drifts. That's natural. There's no need to pull it back sharply. Let it wander where it wants to go. If it drifts away from these words, that's fine. If it returns, that's fine too. There's no wrong way to be here right now. No right way either. Just being is enough. The philosophers would understand this state. This gentle transition between waking and sleeping. This threshold where the mind is no longer fully engaged with the external world but not yet fully immersed in dreams. It's a liminal space, peaceful and safe. A space between spaces. Aristotle spoke of potentiality and actuality. In sleep, the mind returns to a state of pure potentiality. It releases its grip on specific thoughts and actions. It becomes open, receptive, ready for the restoration that sleep brings. You're moving into that state now, gradually, without effort. Moving like water finding its level. The ideas we've explored together, they'll be there if you want to return to them. But right now, they can just fade into the background. Like the last light fading from the Athenian sky. Like the final conversations of the day trailing off into silence. Everything is settling. Everything is softening. And you can soften with it. Becoming gentler, quieter, stiller. There's nothing left to understand. Nothing left to figure out. The ancient philosophers offered their thoughts, and now those thoughts can dissolve like mist. In the quiet of this ancient night, a question arises, gentle and unhurried. What is virtue? Not as a demand for an answer, but simply as something to consider, to turn over slowly in the mind. The ancient Greeks spent countless hours with this question, not because they needed to solve it, but because exploring it seemed worthwhile in itself. Socrates would often begin with questions like this. He might be walking through the agora, or sitting with friends as evening approached, and he would ask, almost casually, what do we mean when we say someone is virtuous? What does it mean to live well, to be good? He wouldn't present his own answer immediately. He would wait, allowing the question to settle, giving it space to breathe. Imagine someone responding, perhaps a young student, eager to offer a definition. Virtue is doing the right thing, they might say. And Socrates would nod, encouraging, but then ask gently, what is the right thing? How do we know what's right? Is it the same in every situation, or does it change? The questions aren't meant to trap or confuse. They're meant to open up the idea, to show how much complexity lives within what seemed simple at first. The Greeks had a particular way of thinking about virtue. They called it a rite, which doesn't translate perfectly into our modern languages. It suggests excellence, but not in the sense of being better than others. More like fulfilling your nature, becoming what you're capable of being. A knife has a rite when it cuts well. A horse has a rite when it runs strong and true. But what about a person? Aristotle, who thought deeply about these matters, suggested that virtue for humans has something to do with harmony. Not perfection. Not some impossible standard that no one could ever reach, but a kind of balance, a harmony between different parts of ourselves. The way a musical instrument needs all its strings in tune to produce beautiful sound. Think about the different aspects of being human. We have reason, the capacity to think and reflect. We have emotions, feelings that arise in response to what happens around us and within us. We have desires, wants, needs. We have social bonds, connections to other people. Virtue, Aristotle suggested, might be about bringing all these elements into some kind of working harmony. But what would that harmony look like? Socrates might ask, is it the same for everyone? Or does each person need to find their own particular balance? The questions unfold slowly, without urgency. There's no test at the end, no need to arrive at a final answer. Consider courage, often held up as a virtue. What is courage exactly? Is it the absence of fear? That's not quite right. Someone who feels no fear isn't necessarily courageous. They might simply not understand the danger. True courage, perhaps, involves feeling fear and acting anyway when it's appropriate to do so. But then, what makes it appropriate? The questions continue, gentle and persistent, like water slowly shaping stone. If courage is a virtue, is more courage always better? Or can someone be too courageous, reckless even? Aristotle thought about this carefully. He suggested that virtue often lies in a middle path between extremes. Not too much, not too little, but just right for the situation. But finding that middle path, that harmony, isn't like following a simple rule. It requires awareness, attention, practice. It's more like learning to play an instrument than memorizing a formula. You have to develop a feel for it, a sensitivity to what the moment requires. Socrates might ask, can virtue be taught? Can someone give it to you, the way they might give you information? Or is it something you have to cultivate in yourself, like tending a garden? The question hangs in the air, not demanding an answer, just inviting reflection. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates often encounters people who are very confident they know what virtue is. They have clear definitions, firm opinions. But through gentle questioning, that certainty begins to soften. Not because Socrates is trying to prove them wrong, but because the questions reveal how much more there is to consider than first appeared. What emerges isn't confusion, though. It's more like an opening, a spaciousness. When you realize you don't fully understand something, it can actually be freeing. You're no longer bound by a rigid definition. You can explore, wonder, remain curious. Virtue as harmony suggests something dynamic, not static. Like a musician constantly adjusting their playing to stay in tune, or a sailor adjusting their sails to work with changing winds. It's not about reaching a fixed state of perfection and staying there. It's about ongoing attention, continuous small adjustments, responsiveness to life as it unfolds. And if that's true, then perhaps no one ever achieves virtue in some final sense. Perhaps it's always a work in progress, always unfolding. Socrates himself claimed to know nothing, to be wise only in recognizing his own ignorance. Yet is remembered as one of the wisest people who ever lived. What does it mean to be virtuous in your own life? Not as an abstract question, but as something lived, embodied, real. The ancient philosophers would suggest that this question doesn't have a single answer you can write down and be done with. It's a question you live with, that evolves as you evolve, that reveals new dimensions over time. As you rest here in this ancient space, you don't need to solve the question of virtue. You don't need to formulate a perfect definition or decide anything at all. The question can simply be present, like the distant sound of the sea, like the gentle flicker of lamplight. Present but not demanding. There, if you want to consider it, or easy to let drift away. The Greek philosophers spent lifetimes with questions like these. Not because they were confused, but because they found the questions themselves valuable, enriching, worth returning to again and again. The exploration itself was the point. The harmony they sought wasn't a destination, but a way of traveling. And perhaps that's enough for now. To know that virtue has something to do with harmony, with balance, with becoming more fully yourself. That can be enough. The night deepens, and another question emerges from the ancient world. What is courage? When we hear that word, we might immediately think of dramatic acts, heroic battles, grand gestures of bravery. But the Greek philosophers had a quieter understanding, something more subtle, more accessible. Aristotle spoke of courage not as the absence of fear, but as a particular relationship with it. In his view, the courageous person feels fear when fear is appropriate, but isn't ruled by it. They can act despite the fear, not because they've conquered it or eliminated it, but because they've found a way to be steady in its presence. Imagine standing on the shore as a storm approaches. The waves grow larger, the wind picks up, dark clouds gather on the horizon. There's a natural fear that arises, a recognition of power greater than yourself. Courage isn't pretending the storm doesn't exist. It's standing steady, acknowledging what's there, responding thoughtfully rather than reactively. Socrates might ask, what makes someone steady? Is it something they're born with, or something they develop? Can steadiness be practiced, cultivated, grown over time? The questions aren't pressing for immediate answers. They're opening up space, inviting contemplation. In ancient Athens, courage was often associated with soldiers, with those who faced physical danger in battle. But Plato suggested there were other forms of courage too. The courage to face difficult truths about yourself. The courage to remain committed to what you believe is right, even when it's unpopular. The courage to be vulnerable, to admit uncertainty. What if courage isn't always loud and dramatic? What if sometimes it's quiet, almost invisible? The courage to sit with uncomfortable feelings rather than immediately trying to escape them. The courage to let yourself rest when everything in you wants to keep pushing. The courage to be gentle with yourself. Aristotle observed that courage exists between two extremes. On one side is cowardice, being paralyzed by fear. On the other side is recklessness, acting without appropriate caution. Courage lives somewhere in the middle, aware of both fear and possibility, able to find a wise path between them. Finding that middle path requires steadiness, a groundedness. Not the steadiness of stone, rigid and unchanging. More like the steadiness of a tree in wind, rooted but able to bend, flexible but not easily uprooted. Socrates might wonder, where does this steadiness come from? Is it in the body, in the breath, in the way we hold ourselves? Is it in the mind, in how we think about what frightens us? Perhaps it's all of these, working together. In the quiet schools of Athens, students would learn that courage isn't separate from wisdom. The truly courageous person is also wise. They know which dangers deserve fear and which don't. They can assess situations clearly, without panic distorting their perception. What about the fear itself? Must it always be overcome, defeated, pushed away? Or is there another possibility? The ancient philosophers might suggest that fear has its place. It carries information, signals potential danger. The question isn't whether to feel fear, but how to be with it. Imagine fear as a visitor that arrives at your door. You could refuse to acknowledge it, but it remains, knocking insistently. You could fight with it, but that takes tremendous energy. Or you could open the door, acknowledge its presence, listen to what it has to say, but not let it dictate your choices. This is where courage and rest intersect. Sometimes courage means acting, but sometimes it means allowing, accepting, letting be. The courage to let fear rest in you without immediately trying to fix it. The courage to trust that you can coexist with difficult feelings. Socrates was known for a particular kind of courage. When Athens condemned him to death, he faced it with remarkable calm. He could have fled or begged for mercy. Instead, he remained steady. He continued teaching, continued questioning, continued being exactly who he was. His courage wasn't loud or aggressive. It was quiet, grounded, unmovable. What does steadiness feel like in your own experience? Perhaps it's connected to breath, to the simple act of breathing slowly and fully. Perhaps it's a quality of attention, staying present rather than racing ahead. Perhaps it's a softening, a release of the need to control everything. Aristotle might observe that courage becomes easier with practice. The first time you face something frightening, steadiness might feel impossible. But each time you practice being present with fear, something shifts. Not because you become fearless, but because you develop trust in your ability to handle difficult moments. And here, in this quiet ancient space, there's nothing you need to be courageous about right now. This is a moment of safety, of rest. The fears you carry can rest too. They don't need to be resolved or conquered. They can simply be allowed to settle, to quiet, to soften their grip. The philosophers would understand this. They knew that sometimes the most courageous thing is to stop struggling, to allow yourself to simply be as you are. Not giving up, but releasing the exhausting effort of constant vigilance. Courage as steadiness, not as tension or strain, but as a deep-rootedness that allows for flexibility. Strong enough to face what needs to be faced, soft enough to bend without breaking, present enough to acknowledge fear, wise enough not to be consumed by it. As the night continues, as your body relaxes more deeply, you might notice that steadiness arising naturally, not because you're trying to create it, but because it's already there. A fundamental ground, stable and quiet, that's always been present. Courage, in its deepest sense, might simply be trusting that ground. The ancient voices fade now. What remains is just this moment, this breath, this gentle settling. Fear can rest. Struggle can rest. And in that rest, a natural steadiness emerges, effortless and sure. In the stillness of this ancient evening, another idea emerges, soft and contemplative. Justice, a word that might immediately bring to mind courts and laws, rules and punishments. But Plato had a different way of thinking about justice, something more intimate, more personal. He was interested in justice not just in society, but within the individual soul. In his dialogue, The Republic, Plato explores what it means for a city to be just. But as the conversation unfolds, it becomes clear that he's really asking about something else. What does it mean for a person to be just? What does justice look like when it lives inside you, in the way you organize your inner life? Plato imagined the soul as having different parts, different aspects that all need to work together. There's the part that reasons, that thinks and plans and considers. There's the part that feels spirited, passionate, that responds with emotion and energy. And there's the part that desires, that wants and needs and seeks satisfaction. None of these parts is bad or wrong. Each has its place, its purpose. Justice, in Plato's view, is when these parts exist in right relationship with each other, when reason can guide without tyrannizing, when spirit can energize without overwhelming, when desire can motivate without consuming. It's a kind of inner harmony, a balance where each part does what it does best. Socrates might ask, what happens when this balance is disrupted? What does it feel like when one part tries to rule the others completely? Perhaps you've experienced moments when desire takes over entirely, when you want something so intensely that reason and caution fade away, or times when reason becomes so dominant that you're cut off from feeling. The question isn't about judging these imbalances. It's about noticing them, understanding them, recognizing how they feel. Inner justice isn't about perfection. It's about awareness, about gently guiding yourself back toward balance when you drift away from it. Aristotle, too, spoke of balance. He observed that human beings need different things at different times. We need activity and rest. We need engagement and withdrawal. We need thinking and feeling. Justice within yourself might mean honoring all these needs, not privileging one at the expense of others. What would it mean to be just to your own mind? We often demand so much from our minds, asking them to be constantly alert, constantly productive, constantly solving problems. But is that balanced? Is that fair to the mind itself, which also needs periods of quiet, of wandering, of rest? Plato might suggest that true inner justice involves allowing each part of yourself its proper time and space. Time for the reasoning mind to work, to analyze, to plan. But also time for that mind to rest, to soften, to let go of its constant activity. Time for feelings to arise and be acknowledged. Time for desires to be recognized without necessarily being acted upon. In the quiet schools of Athens, students learned that justice wasn't just about external actions. It was about cultivating a certain quality of being, an inner alignment. When your inner life is in balance, your outer actions tend to reflect that naturally. You don't have to force yourself to do the right thing. It flows more easily from who you are. Socrates would ask, can you be just to yourself if you never rest? If you're constantly demanding more, pushing harder, refusing to acknowledge your own limitations? Or does justice require a kind of compassion, a recognition that you, like all humans, need care and gentleness? Right now, in this moment, what would inner justice look like? Perhaps it means acknowledging that your thinking mind has worked enough for today, that it deserves rest, that it deserves to soften its grip on problems and concerns. That giving it this rest isn't weakness or laziness, but actually a form of justice, of treating yourself fairly. The ancient philosophers recognized that balance isn't a static state. It's dynamic, constantly adjusting. Like a dancer maintaining balance through subtle, continuous movements. Inner justice isn't something you achieve once and then have forever. It's an ongoing practice of noticing and adjusting. What about the balance between thought and rest right now? You've been listening, perhaps thinking about these ideas, perhaps letting your mind engage gently with these ancient questions. And now, maybe it's time for the scale to tip more toward rest. Not abandoning thought entirely, but allowing it to become quieter, softer, less active. Plato wrote that in a just soul, reason rules, but it rules with wisdom and gentleness. It doesn't dominate through force. It guides the way a skilled conductor guides an orchestra, bringing all the different instruments into harmony. Each instrument plays its part, none drowning out the others. Can you feel that possibility in yourself? The possibility of different parts of you coexisting peacefully, each having its place, none fighting for total control. The thinking mind can be present without dominating. Emotions can flow without overwhelming. Physical sensations can be noticed without demanding immediate response. All of it together, balanced, harmonized. And sometimes, inner justice simply means stopping. Recognizing when you've given enough energy to thinking, to doing, to figuring out. Recognizing that rest isn't the opposite of justice, but actually a crucial part of it. A just life includes rest, requires it, honors it. The night around you continues its quiet presence. Even the philosophers, after long days of teaching and dialogue, would have eventually laid down to rest. They understood that the mind, like the body, has natural rhythms. That pushing beyond those rhythms isn't virtuous. It's actually a form of injustice to yourself. So here, now, you can practice inner justice, allowing the active, thinking parts of your mind to step back, allowing rest to take its rightful place, not as something you're forced into, but as something you choose, recognizing its value, honoring its necessity. This is balance. This is harmony. This, perhaps, is what the ancient philosophers meant by justice within the soul. As the night deepens further, a paradox emerges from the ancient world. One of the most famous statements attributed to Socrates is also one of the most puzzling. I know that I know nothing. What could he have meant by this? How could the wisest man in Athens claim to know nothing at all? The oracle at Delphi declared that no one was wiser than Socrates. When Socrates heard this, he was confused. He didn't feel wise. So he set out to test the oracle's claim, to find someone wiser than himself. He went to people with reputations for wisdom, politicians who claimed to know how to run a city, poets who claimed to know how to capture truth, craftsmen who claimed to know their trades perfectly. And through careful questioning, Socrates discovered something interesting. These people thought they knew much more than they actually did. They were confident in knowledge they didn't really possess. Socrates realized that his wisdom consisted of one thing. He knew the limits of his knowledge. He was aware of how much he didn't know. And this awareness, this humility, was something the others lacked. They were certain, confident, but their certainty was built on unexamined assumptions. What if there's a kind of peace in not knowing? In our world, we often feel pressure to have answers, to be certain. Not knowing can feel like failure. But Socrates suggests something different. That acknowledging what you don't know is actually a form of clarity, of honesty, of wisdom. Plato explored this idea throughout his dialogues. Again and again, Socrates would engage someone in conversation, exploring questions about justice or courage or beauty. And again, the dialogue would end without a definitive answer. The participants would recognize that the question was more complex than they initially thought. That certainty had given way to wonder. Is this frustrating? Or is there something freeing about it? When you admit you don't know something, you release the burden of having to defend a position. You open yourself to learning, to discovery. You become curious rather than defensive. Socrates might ask, what do you really know with absolute certainty? Not what you've been told, not what you assume, but what you've examined thoroughly. The list, if you're honest, might be shorter than you'd expect. And that's not a problem. That's just being truthful about the human condition. There's a gentleness in not knowing. When you're not defending fixed positions, when you're not trying to prove you're right, something in you can relax. The mind doesn't have to be constantly on guard. It can be open, receptive, at ease. Aristotle, though he valued knowledge, also recognized its limits. He distinguished between different types of knowledge. But beyond all these types, there remained mystery. Things that couldn't be fully grasped or explained. What about the pressure to know? To have everything figured out, to never admit uncertainty? Where does that pressure come from? And what would happen if you released it, even just for this moment? What if it's okay not to know? What if it's actually better, wiser, more peaceful? In the ancient schools, students weren't expected to memorize answers. They were taught to question, to examine, to think for themselves. The goal wasn't to fill their minds with facts, but to awaken a certain quality of attention, to help them see more clearly, think more carefully, hold their conclusions more lightly. Socratic humility isn't about pretending to be ignorant. It's about being honest about the difference between what you actually know and what you merely believe or assume. Most of what we think we know is actually assumption, habit, inherited belief. Real knowledge, examined and tested, is rarer than we like to admit. And there's something restful in this recognition. You don't have to maintain the exhausting pretense of knowing everything. You don't have to have an opinion on every topic. You can simply say, I don't know. And in that admission, find a kind of freedom. What would it feel like to know less? Not in the sense of losing information, but in the sense of holding your knowledge more lightly, being less certain, less fixed, more fluid in your understanding. Would that feel like loss? Or might it actually feel like relief, like a weight being lifted? Socrates spent his days in dialogue, exploring questions with anyone who would engage. But at night, he would return home, and presumably those questions would quiet. The act of searching would give way to something else, perhaps to rest, perhaps to a deeper form of not knowing, where even the questions themselves dissolve. Right now, you don't need to know anything. You don't need to understand these philosophical ideas completely. You don't need to remember them or analyze them. You can simply let them pass through, like wind through leaves. Some may catch your attention briefly. Others may drift by unnoticed. Both are fine. The ancient philosophers understood that there are different states of mind. The state for active inquiry and the state for rest. The state for questioning and the state for simply being. Each has its time. Each has its value. And knowing which state is appropriate for which moment, that itself is a kind of wisdom. In this moment, perhaps the wisest thing is to know less, to let the certainties of the day soften and blur, to release the need to understand or figure out or solve, to rest in the spaciousness of not knowing, where the mind doesn't have to work so hard, where it can simply be quiet and still. Socrates knew that he knew nothing, and in that knowing, he found a kind of wisdom that eluded those who were certain they knew everything. Perhaps you can find that wisdom too, right now. The wisdom of releasing knowledge, of admitting the vastness of what remains unknown. The peace of not having to know. The night continues. Questions dissolve into darkness. And what remains is simply this breath, this moment, this gentle unknowing. The ancient Greeks thought deeply about friendship. They had different words for different types of love, recognizing that the bond between friends was distinct from other forms of connection. Aristotle devoted significant attention to friendship in his writings, considering it one of the most important aspects of a good life. Aristotle distinguished between different kinds of friendship. Some friendships are based on utility, on what each person can do for the other. Some are based on pleasure, on enjoying each other's company. But the deepest form of friendship is based on mutual recognition of goodness. Friends in this truest sense see each other clearly and want what's best for them. What's interesting is that this kind of friendship doesn't always require words. Two friends can sit together in silence and feel completely at ease. There's no pressure to entertain, to perform, to fill the space with conversation. Just being present together is enough. The companionship itself is the gift. Plato valued friendship deeply. His philosophical school, the Academy, was not just a place of learning but a community of friends. Philosophy wasn't practiced in isolation. It was something people did together, in dialogue, in shared exploration. But there's another kind of companionship that the philosophers recognized. The companionship of ideas themselves, of thoughts that stay with you, that become familiar presences in your inner life. Philosophy, in this sense, can be like a friend. Something you can turn to, something that keeps you company, especially in quiet moments. At night, when the external world grows quiet, when you're alone with your thoughts, what keeps you company? Sometimes it's worries, concerns that circle endlessly. But it could also be something gentler, a question that interests you, an idea that brings peace, a perspective that helps you see things differently. The Stoic philosophers spoke of philosophy as a medicine for the soul, not something abstract or removed from daily life, but a practical companion that helps you navigate difficulties. Marcus Aurelius would write to himself at night. Reminders, reflections, gentle guidance. Philosophy was his companion in the darkness, helping him find perspective and calm. True friendship, the philosopher suggested, involves seeing and being seen. Not the surface version of yourself that you show to the world, but something deeper. Your actual thoughts, your real struggles, your genuine aspirations. A true friend can hold all of that without judgment, with acceptance and care. Can you be that kind of friend to yourself? Can you sit with yourself at night, in the quiet, and offer that same quality of companionship? Not criticizing, not demanding, just being present with kindness and acceptance. Philosophy, at its best, teaches this kind of self-friendship. Aristotle said that a friend is another self, that in friendship you see yourself reflected, but also expanded. Your friend shows you perspectives you might not have considered, helps you become more than you would be alone. In the stillness of night, philosophy can be that friend. These ancient ideas, these gentle questions, they're not imposing themselves on you. They're simply present, offering companionship if you want it. Like a good friend, they don't demand constant attention. They are just there. There's something profoundly comforting about companionship that doesn't require words. The philosopher Epicurus believed that philosophy should bring peace and pleasure. He gathered friends around him, not for intense debate, but for gentle conversation, shared meals, quiet enjoyment of each other's presence. Friendship, for Epicurus, was one of the greatest goods life offers. What makes companionship restful rather than draining? Perhaps it's the absence of performance, of trying to be anything other than what you are. In true friendship, you can be quiet. You can be uncertain. You can be tired. And it's all okay. The friendship holds you regardless. At night, this quality of companionship becomes especially valuable. The day is done. There's nothing more to prove, nothing more to accomplish. You can simply be, and that's enough. If philosophy is your companion here, it asks nothing of you. It simply sits with you in the darkness. Even in solitude, you're not entirely alone. The thoughts of philosophers who lived thousands of years ago keep you company. Their questions, their insights, their gentle guidance. They faced nights like this one. They knew weariness, uncertainty, the need for rest. And they found ways to be with themselves that brought peace rather than turmoil. Philosophy as a friend doesn't solve all your problems. True friends rarely do. But it stays with you. It listens. It offers perspective when you need it and silence when you don't. It accepts you as you are while gently inviting you toward growth. As sleep approaches, as the boundary between waking and dreaming becomes thin, what kind of companionship do you want? Something demanding, insistent, or something gentle, accepting, allowing you to soften and release? Philosophy, in this ancient sense, offers the latter. Companionship without pressure. Presence without demands. The night holds you. These ideas, these old friends from distant Athens, sit quietly nearby. You're not alone, even in silence, even in not knowing, even in rest. Friendship, the philosophers knew, is one of life's greatest gifts. And tonight, you have that gift. Companionship, presence, peace. There's a concept Aristotle returned to again and again in his thinking. The idea of the mean, the middle way. Not as a mathematical average, but as a kind of natural center point. A place of balance where things feel right, where excess and deficiency both fall away. He noticed this pattern everywhere in nature and in human life. Too much water drowns a plant. Too little withers it. Too much heat burns. Too much cold freezes. Somewhere between the extremes, there's a zone where life flourishes, where things can be as they're meant to be. For Aristotle, this wasn't just about external conditions. It applied to internal states as well, to emotions, to actions, to ways of being in the world. Between extremes, there's often a calm center, a place that doesn't push too hard in any direction, a natural resting point. What does moderation feel like? Not moderation as restriction or deprivation, not forcing yourself to be less than you are, but finding that place where you're neither straining forward nor pulling back, where effort and ease balance naturally, where you're neither too tight nor too loose. At night, this sense of center becomes particularly important. The day often pulls us toward extremes, pushing hard, doing more, being more, or collapsing entirely, giving up, shutting down. But night invites something different, a middle way between activity and collapse, gentle settling rather than forced relaxation. Aristotle would say that virtue lives in this middle space, not as a rigid rule, but as a sensitivity, learning to feel when you've gone too far in one direction, developing the awareness to guide yourself back toward center. It's less like following instructions and more like developing an instinct. There's a quality of stillness that emerges at the center point, not the stillness of being frozen or stuck, more like the stillness at the eye of a storm, where movement happens all around but there's a core of calm, or the stillness of deep water, which may have currents flowing through it but maintains an essential quiet. The mean, in Aristotle's thinking, isn't the same for everyone. What's balanced for one person might be extreme for another. It depends on your nature, your circumstances, your particular needs at a particular time. The wisdom lies in knowing your own center, finding your own balance point. Can you sense where your center is right now? Not through thinking about it analytically, but through feeling. There might be a quality of ease there, of things settling into place, neither pushing forward into alertness nor falling away into complete unconsciousness. Just this gentle middle space. The ancient Greeks had a famous saying carved into the temple at Delphi: nothing in excess. It sounds like a restriction, a rule, but perhaps it's actually pointing toward freedom. When you're not pulled toward extremes, when you can rest in moderation, there's a spaciousness that opens up. You're not constantly correcting course, not swinging wildly from one side to another. Stillness at the center isn't empty or boring. It's actually quite rich. All possibilities exist there in potential. You could move in any direction, but you don't have to move at all. There's power in that choice, in that freedom to simply be where you are. Aristotle spent years observing the natural world, plants, animals, the patterns of weather and seasons. He saw that nature tends toward balance over time. Systems that swing too far in one direction eventually correct themselves. There's a kind of wisdom in this, a movement toward equilibrium that doesn't require conscious effort. Your own system, your body and mind, has this same tendency. When you stop interfering, stop pushing and pulling, it naturally finds its balance point. The breath evens out. Muscles release unnecessary tension. Thoughts slow and soften, all by itself, without your having to make it happen. Moderation, in the deepest sense, might mean trusting this natural balancing. Not forcing anything, not trying to achieve some perfect state. Just allowing your system to find its own way to center. Like a pendulum gradually coming to rest, not because you stopped it, but because momentum naturally decreases. At night, this trust becomes easier. The day's demands have receded. There's nothing you need to moderate or balance or manage. You can simply let the natural settling happen. Let the extremes fall away. Let the center reveal itself. The calm center isn't something you create. It's something you discover. It's been there all along, underneath the fluctuations and extremes, like bedrock beneath shifting soil. Solid, stable, unchanging even when everything on the surface moves. Aristotle believed that happiness, true flourishing, comes from living in accordance with this natural balance, not from dramatic highs or from avoiding all lows, but from finding and maintaining that middle way where life can flow smoothly, where you're neither grasping nor rejecting, just present, aware, centered. There's a gentleness to the mean. It doesn't demand perfection. It allows for small variations, small movements away from center and back again. Like breathing, which is never exactly the same from one breath to the next, yet always returns to its natural rhythm. As you rest here, you don't need to achieve any particular state. Don't need to be perfectly still or perfectly relaxed or perfectly anything. The middle way includes acceptance of where you actually are, not striving to be different, not resisting what is. Just this gentle being in the middle of your own experience. The philosophers knew that moderation isn't exciting. It doesn't make dramatic stories, but it makes for a peaceful life, a sustainable way of being. And at night, when excitement is given way to quiet, moderation feels like coming home, like finding the place you've been looking for without knowing you were looking. Stillness deepens, not because you're trying harder, because you're trying less, because you're allowing the natural center to hold you. Aristotle's mean, that calm middle point, is here, always has been, always will be, and you can rest there, safe and still. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. It's one of his most famous statements, often quoted, often misunderstood. What did he mean by examination? And how does one examine life without turning it into a constant interrogation, a relentless self-criticism? The ancient idea of examination wasn't harsh or judgmental. It was more like quiet observation, paying attention, noticing what arises in your experience without immediately rushing to change it or fix it or explain it away. Just seeing what's there. Imagine sitting by a stream, watching water flow past. Leaves float by. Small fish dart through the current. Patterns of light dance on the surface. You're not trying to stop the flow or redirect it. You're simply watching, observing, being present to what passes before you. Examination, in the philosophical sense, can be like this. Your thoughts move like that stream. One thought arises, floats through awareness, fades away. Another appears. Emotions come and go like weather. Sensations in the body shift and change. The examined life, at its gentlest, is simply being aware of this flow, watching it happen. Socrates would engage people in dialogue, asking questions that invited them to look more closely at their assumptions and beliefs. But the goal wasn't to make them feel wrong or foolish. It was to help them see more clearly, to notice what they hadn't noticed before, to examine ideas they'd accepted without really looking at them. At night, this kind of examination becomes softer still. You're not trying to solve anything or figure anything out. You're simply aware. A thought drifts by, maybe a worry about tomorrow. You notice it. You don't have to engage with it, analyze it, or push it away. Just notice. Plato suggested that true knowledge involves recognizing what you're seeing clearly versus what you're seeing dimly. Some things in our experience are sharp and obvious. Others are vague, shadowy, unclear. Examination means acknowledging this difference, not pretending everything is clear when it isn't. What thoughts are drifting through your awareness right now? You don't need to name them all or understand them. They might be distinct thoughts with words and meanings, or they might be vaguer, more like impressions or feelings. Either way, they're just passing through, like clouds across the sky. The examined life doesn't mean constant vigilance. It doesn't mean never relaxing your attention or letting your mind wander. Aristotle recognized that different activities require different levels of awareness. Sometimes you need sharp focus. Sometimes you need to let things blur and soften. Both have their place. Examination without judgment. This is the crucial part. You're not watching your thoughts to criticize them, to decide which are good and which are bad. You're simply observing, noticing, being curious about the patterns and movements of your own mind. Socrates would sometimes stand completely still for hours, lost in thought. But he also knew when to move, when to engage, when to let contemplation give way to action. The examined life includes knowing when to examine and when to simply be, when to look closely and when to let your gaze soften. Right now, can you watch a single thought arise and pass away, not holding on to it, not developing it into a whole story, just observing its appearance and its disappearance, like watching a single wave rise from the ocean and dissolve back into it? The wave was there. Now it's gone. That's all. The ancient philosophers believed that this capacity for observation, for witnessing your own experience, is deeply human. Animals live through their experiences but may not reflect on them. Humans can step back slightly, can notice what they're experiencing even as they experience it. This gap, this small space of awareness, is where freedom lives. But observation can become tiring if it's too intense. If you're constantly monitoring, constantly checking, constantly analyzing. The examined life, done gently, doesn't exhaust you. It's more like peripheral vision than focused staring. Aware, but not straining. Present, but not tense. Plato wrote about the philosopher's need to return from intense contemplation. Even examination needs pauses. Even awareness needs to soften sometimes into something less directed, more diffuse. Your thoughts continue their movement. Some you notice, some you don't. Both are fine. You're not trying to catch every single thought, to examine every moment of experience. You're simply aware that examination is possible, that you can observe when you choose to, and you can let observation fade when you choose that too. The examined life isn't separate from the restful life. They can coexist. You can be gently aware even as you relax, noticing the settling of your body, observing the slowing of your thoughts, watching as wakefulness gradually gives way to something softer, quieter, less defined. Socrates examined ideas. He examined beliefs and assumptions and arguments. But he must have also experienced moments like this, where examination itself dissolves, where there's nothing to question, nothing to analyze. Just being. Just this simple presence. Before words, before thought, before the need to understand. The stream continues flowing. You continue watching, or you don't. Either way, the flow goes on. Thoughts arise and pass. And somewhere in that gentle observation, or in the release of observation, there's peace. The examined life, at its softest, is simply this: being here, noticing what can be noticed, letting go of what can be let go. Socrates said the unexamined life isn't worth living. But perhaps he would also say that the over-examined life is exhausting. That wisdom includes knowing when to look and when to close your eyes, when to question and when to rest in simple unknowing, when to examine and when to simply drift. The night holds all of this: awareness and release, observation and letting go, the examined life and the surrendered life, both together. No contradiction, no conflict, just the natural rhythm of attention and rest, watching and releasing, being present and drifting away. And as that drifting deepens, even these words become just more thoughts floating by, more leaves in the stream, more clouds in the sky. You can watch them pass, or you can close your eyes. The choice is always yours, and whatever you choose is exactly right. We return now to where we began, though the path has changed us. Virtue. That word the ancient Greeks spent so much time considering. It feels different now, softer around the edges, less like something to achieve and more like something to recognize. The philosophers spoke of virtue as a kind of harmony. Different parts of yourself working together, not fighting, not pulling in opposite directions. Like instruments in an ensemble, each contributing its particular sound, creating something beautiful through their combination. Not perfection, just balance. Courage, we explored earlier, isn't the absence of fear. It's steadiness in fear's presence. The ability to remain grounded even when things feel uncertain or frightening. And right now, in this quiet moment, there's nothing to be courageous about. But that steadiness, that quality of being rooted, it's still here. Available. Part of who you are. Justice, the ancient thinker suggested, lives inside you before it lives in the world. It's about right relationship between different aspects of yourself. Giving the thinking mind its time, but also giving rest its time. Honoring both activity and stillness. Neither dominating. Both having their place. The knowledge we discussed, or rather the not knowing, it rests more easily now. You don't need to understand everything. Don't need to hold on to ideas or analyze them or figure them out. The peace of not knowing has settled in, comfortable and quiet. What you don't understand can simply remain mysterious. Friendship, that companionship the Greeks valued so highly, perhaps you feel it now. Not with another person necessarily, but with yourself, with this moment, with these gentle thoughts that keep you company in the darkness. Presence without demand. Companionship without words. Moderation, Aristotle's mean, that calm center between extremes. It's here too. Neither trying too hard nor giving up entirely. Neither grasping at wakefulness nor forcing sleep. Just allowing yourself to be exactly where you are. In the middle. At the center. At rest. The examined life we touched upon. That gentle observation without judgment. Maybe you're still aware, peripherally, of thoughts moving through. Or maybe awareness itself has softened into something less distinct. Either way is fine. Examination doesn't have to be constant. It can fade when it's time to fade. All these concepts, these ancient ideas about how to live well, they circle around the same essential insight. Life flourishes in balance. Not in extremes, not in constant striving or constant surrender, but in that middle space where things can be as they are, where you can be as you are. Virtue, in the end, isn't complicated. It's not about following rigid rules or achieving impossible standards. It's more like being in tune, like an instrument that's neither too tight nor too loose, playing the note that wants to be played in this particular moment. The ancient philosophers, for all their intellectual sophistication, kept coming back to simple things. How to live peacefully. How to treat yourself and others well. How to find balance. How to rest when rest is needed. These aren't abstract puzzles. They're practical questions about daily life. And at night, the answers become even simpler. Be kind to yourself. Let go of what can be let go. Trust that rest will come when you stop chasing it. Allow your mind and body to find their natural rhythm. That's virtue. That's living well. Right here, right now. The harmony the philosophers spoke of, you might feel it settling over you. Not dramatically. Not as some grand achievement. Just a quiet sense of things being in their right place. Your breathing in its rhythm. Your body in its rest. Your mind in its gradual quieting. Courage is here, that steadiness, that rootedness. Justice is here, that balance between different needs. Wisdom is here, that acceptance of not knowing. Friendship is here, that gentle companionship. Moderation is here, that calm center. All of it together, not separate virtues but different aspects of one thing. Being at peace. The ancient world we've been visiting, that Athens of quiet streets and oil lamps, it's not so far away now. It's here. In this darkness, in this stillness, in this gentle letting go. The philosophers walk these same paths at night. Socrates with his questions that have grown quiet. Plato with his ideals that have softened into simple presence. Aristotle with his careful observations that have dissolved into just being. They understood something essential. That all the thinking, all the analyzing, all the philosophical exploration eventually leads back to something simple. To being here. To accepting what is. To resting in the natural harmony that emerges when you stop trying to force anything. Virtue as harmony. You don't have to create it. You just have to allow it. Stop interfering with the natural settling. Stop resisting the natural rhythm. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind knows how to quiet. The harmony is already there, waiting to be recognized. The ideas we've explored together, they're not meant to be burdens. Not things you have to remember or apply or achieve. They're more like lullabies. Gentle sounds that accompany you into rest. Their meaning matters less than their presence, their rhythm, their calming effect. And as that calming deepens, as the harmony settles more fully, the ideas themselves fade. Virtue becomes just a feeling of rightness. Balance becomes just a sense of ease. Wisdom becomes just acceptance. All the words, all the concepts, they dissolve into something wordless. Something that doesn't need explaining or understanding. Something that just is. The ancient philosophers would approve. They knew that philosophy's ultimate goal isn't more thinking. It's a better life. A more peaceful existence. And sometimes, often, that requires thinking less. Knowing less. Just being more. So here, now, with all these ideas gently circling and settling, you can simply rest in what they all point toward. Harmony. Balance. Peace. Not as achievements, but as your natural state. What you already are when nothing is in the way. When striving stops. When questioning quiets. When you finally, fully, completely rest. Above the ancient city, above the temples and gardens and quiet streets, the stars turn. They've been turning since long before Athens existed, since long before humans walked the earth. They'll continue turning long after everything we know has crumbled into dust. The ancient Greeks looked up at this vast wheel of light and saw something that filled them with awe. The cosmos, they observed, moves in patterns. Night follows day follows night in endless succession. The moon waxes full and wanes to darkness and returns again. Seasons rotate through their ancient dance, spring to summer to autumn to winter, year after year, century after century. Nothing in this grand movement hurries. Nothing hesitates. It simply unfolds. Aristotle spent countless nights observing the heavens. He noticed how the stars maintain their positions relative to each other, how they wheel across the sky as one great sphere. The planets, those wanderers, trace their slow paths against the fixed stars. Everything moving, yet everything ordered. Everything changing, yet everything following patterns older than memory. There's something profoundly calming in this cosmic order. The stars don't worry about their motion. The moon doesn't struggle to complete its cycle. The earth doesn't resist its turning. Everything happens as it happens, with a kind of effortless inevitability. No force, no strain, just the natural unfolding of what must be. Plato imagined the cosmos as a living being, intelligent and eternal. He saw in its movements a kind of perfection, a harmony that human life could aspire to but never quite match. The celestial spheres, turning in their nested circles, produced a music too subtle for human ears to detect. The music of the spheres, eternal and unchanging, the universe singing to itself. Imagine that sound, that cosmic music beyond hearing. Not loud or dramatic, but vast and subtle. The hum of planets in their orbits. The whisper of stars maintaining their ancient patterns. A sound that's been continuous since the beginning of time, that will continue until time itself ends. You can't hear it with your ears, but perhaps you can feel it. A vibration, a resonance. The universe's deep note. The ancient astronomers recognized that human lives are brief flickers against this cosmic backdrop. We're born, we live, we die, all in the space of perhaps 80 revolutions of the Earth around the Sun. The stars we see tonight are the same stars Socrates saw, the same stars Plato and Aristotle gazed upon. They'll be there long after we're gone, unchanged, eternal, indifferent. But this vastness doesn't diminish us. The philosophers found comfort in it. To be part of something so immense, so perfectly ordered, so utterly beyond the scale of human concerns. Your worries, your fears, your small troubles, they're real, but they're also temporary. The cosmos doesn't notice them. The stars continue their dance regardless. There's a relief in this perspective. The universe doesn't need you to understand it, doesn't need you to do anything at all. It unfolds its patterns whether you're watching or sleeping, whether you're thinking or dreaming. You're held in something infinitely larger than yourself, and you can simply rest in that holding. The cycles continue. Day becomes night becomes day. The moon pulls the tides in their rhythm. Seasons turn. Stars wheel overhead in their ancient paths. And in all this movement, there's a stillness. The stillness of things being exactly as they must be. No deviation. No mistake. Just the calm inevitability of cosmic order. Heraclitus said that everything flows, that you can't step in the same river twice. But he also spoke of the logos, the underlying pattern that governs all change. Things flow, but they flow according to order. Chaos and pattern intertwined. Change and constancy together. The river is always different and always the same. The night sky above you, whether you can see it or only imagine it, contains more stars than you could count in a lifetime. Billions upon billions of suns, each following its path through space. Galaxies beyond galaxies, all moving, all ordered, all part of one incomprehensibly vast dance. And you, lying here on this small planet, you're part of it too. The ancient Greeks believed the heavens were perfect and eternal, while the earth was changeable and temporary. They were wrong about the details. We know now. Stars are born and die. The universe itself had a beginning and may have an end. But they were right about something deeper. The sense of vast time. The recognition of patterns beyond human scale. You don't have to maintain the order of the cosmos. You don't have to keep the stars in their courses or the planets in their orbits. It all happens without your effort, without your attention. And in the same way, many things in your own life can happen without constant vigilance. Breathing continues without your managing it. Your heart beats without your directing it. The philosophers looked up and saw eternity, unchanging patterns in constant motion, the same and different, being and becoming, all of it together, all of it ordered, all of it unfolding as it must. And tonight, as every night, that cosmic order continues. The stars turn, the earth rotates, the moon follows its path, and you, small as you are against this vastness, brief as your life is against eternity, you're held in this order, part of it, included in it. You don't have to understand it. You just have to be in it, to rest in it, to let yourself be carried by rhythms older and larger than anything you can comprehend. The cosmos asks nothing of you. It doesn't need your consciousness or your understanding or your participation. It simply is, and in being, it creates space for you to simply be as well. No purpose required. No meaning demanded. Just existence, held in the vast ordered mystery of everything. Above Athens, above wherever you are, the stars continue their ancient dance, moving and still, changing and changeless. The eternal order of the cosmos, indifferent and perfect. And in that indifference, a strange comfort. You can rest now. The universe will continue. The patterns will hold. Everything unfolds as it must. Calm. Inevitable. Complete. Night erases the boundaries of time. In darkness, there's no shadow moving across a sundial, no position of the sun to mark the hours. The ancient Greeks, sitting in this same darkness thousands of years ago, experienced night much as you experience it now. The same quality of timelessness. The same dissolution of day's urgent progression. Plato drew a distinction between time and eternity. Time, he suggested, is the moving image of eternity, a reflection, a shadow of something more fundamental. Eternity doesn't pass or progress. It simply is, all at once, complete and whole. Time is what we experience in this changing world, but beyond it, outside it, eternity remains. Untouched, unchanging, always now. In the deep hours of night, this distinction becomes almost tangible. The markers we use to measure time fade away. Is it late or early? How long have you been lying here? The questions lose their urgency, their meaning. Time softens into something less structured, less insistent. You drift in a space that could be minutes or hours. And it doesn't matter. The philosophers practiced thinking about eternity, not as an infinite extension of time, not as time going on forever, but as something entirely outside the stream of time, a dimension where past and future collapse into an eternal present, where everything that was and will be simply is. Aristotle pondered the nature of time itself. What is it that we measure when we measure time? He concluded that time is the measure of change, of movement. Where there's no change, no before and after, there's no time. And in moments of perfect stillness, when nothing in your experience is moving or changing, time disappears. You enter something else, something timeless. The night invites this timelessness. The world has stopped its daytime rushing. The urgent tasks, the schedules, the relentless forward march of one thing after another, all of it suspended. In this suspension, you can touch something eternal, not dramatic or mystical, just a simple quality of being where time's pressure has lifted. Philosophy itself exists in a kind of eternity. The questions Socrates asked are the same questions people ask today. What is good? How should we live? What is real? The conversations in Plato's dialogues feel contemporary because they're about things that don't change. Human nature, the structure of reality. These aren't bound to any particular era. When you engage with these ancient ideas, you step outside the flow of ordinary time. You're connecting with thoughts that are simultaneously 2,000 years old and completely present. Timeless. The wisdom isn't dated. It doesn't belong to the past. It exists in that eternal dimension where truth lives, unaffected by the passage of years. There's no hurry in eternity. No deadline, no schedule, no race against the clock. The truths the philosophers sought weren't time-sensitive. They didn't need to be discovered quickly. They could be explored slowly, patiently, with all the time in the world. With all the time outside the world. In your own experience right now, can you feel time's grip loosening? The day is over. Tomorrow hasn't begun. You're suspended between them, in a moment that doesn't quite belong to either. A liminal space, a threshold. And in this space, you're not moving through time. You're simply here, present in a way that has no duration, no progression. The ancient Stoics spoke of the eternal return. Everything that happens has happened before and will happen again. The same patterns repeating endlessly through time. Which means, in a sense, that all time is already present. Nothing is truly new. Nothing is truly past. It's all here, in the eternal now. This isn't a thought to grasp or understand intellectually. It's more like a feeling, a quality of awareness. When you stop projecting into the future or reviewing the past, when you're simply here in this moment, you touch eternity. Not as an idea, but as an experience. The experience of being without becoming, of existing without going anywhere. Night has always been humanity's doorway to the timeless. When our ancestors sat around fires under the stars, they too felt this dissolution of time's boundaries. The darkness connects you to every human who has ever lain awake in the night, every philosopher who has contemplated eternity. You're all here together, in the eternal now. Philosophy outside urgency. That's what the ancient thinkers practiced. They didn't philosophize to meet deadlines. They thought because thinking itself was valuable, regardless of how long it took or where it led. They had all the time in the world because they were thinking about things that exist outside time. And you, right now, you have all the time in the world too. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to accomplish. The night stretches out, indefinite and spacious. You can rest in this spaciousness. Let time dissolve. Let urgency fade. Let yourself exist in eternity's gentle embrace. Plato believed that before we're born, our souls exist in eternity. We see truth directly, without the distortion of time and change. Then we're born into time, and we forget. Philosophy, he suggested, is remembering, recovering the eternal truths we once knew. And in moments like this, when time's hold weakens, that remembering becomes easier. The truths aren't complex or difficult. They're simple, basic, fundamental. You exist. You're aware. You're part of something vast and mysterious. These aren't facts that belong to any particular moment in time. They're eternally true. True yesterday, true now, true forever. And you can rest in that eternal truth. As minutes or hours pass, or perhaps don't pass, as time becomes meaningless and you drift in timelessness, the ancient philosophers drift with you. Their thoughts, which have survived millennia, float in the same eternal space where you float. Nothing is old. Nothing is new. Everything simply is. The night deepens, or doesn't, time having lost its power to deepen or lighten anything. There's just this eternal moment, this timeless presence, this space outside urgency, outside progression. Here, in eternity's gentle darkness, you can finally rest, not for a measured duration, but in a way that has no duration. Timeless rest, eternal peace. Heraclitus stood by rivers and watched. The water flows past, never the same water twice, yet the river remains. The form stays while the substance continually changes. Everything flows, he observed. Panta rhei. All things are in constant motion, constant transformation, even when they appear still and solid. The ancient philosophers were captivated by this paradox. How can something be itself if it's constantly changing? The person you were yesterday is not quite the person you are today. Cells have died and been replaced. Thoughts have come and gone. Yet you remain you. What is this strange persistence of identity through endless transformation? Plato saw two worlds in this puzzle. The world of being, eternal and unchanging, where perfect forms exist, and the world of becoming, temporal and flowing, where everything is always in process. We live in becoming. We experience change, growth, decay. But somewhere, he believed, there exists the eternal pattern of what we are. Aristotle thought differently. For him, being and becoming weren't separate worlds but two aspects of one reality. Everything that exists is both what it is and what it's becoming. The acorn is itself, and it's also the oak tree in potential. Being and becoming intertwined, inseparable. In the darkness of night, You can feel this dual nature. You are here, present, existing. That's the being part. Solid, real, undeniable. But you're also in process. Thoughts arising and dissolving. Breath flowing in and out. The boundary between waking and sleeping growing thinner. You're becoming something else, moment by moment. There's a deep restfulness in accepting the flow. So much suffering comes from trying to hold forms fixed, trying to keep things as they are, trying to stop the inevitable movement and change. But what if you released that grip? What if you let yourself flow with everything else? The ancient Stoics taught a more farty love of fate, accepting what comes, what changes, what flows, recognizing that change is the fundamental nature of existence. Nothing remains static. Nothing can remain static. And this isn't a tragedy. It's simply how things are. Your body knows this truth intimately. It's been changing since the moment of conception. Cells multiplying, differentiating, dying, being replaced. The body you inhabit now contains almost none of the same physical matter it contained 7 years ago. You're a process, not a thing. A river, not a stone. Always flowing, always new. And yet, something persists. Some essential pattern, some organizing principle. The Greeks called it psyche, soul. Not a supernatural entity, but the principle of life itself, that which maintains coherence through change, the pattern that persists even as the substance flows. In this night moment, you don't need to maintain anything. You don't need to hold yourself together. The pattern holds itself. The process continues without your effort. You can simply be in the becoming. Let it happen. Let yourself transform from awake to asleep, from alert to drowsy, from formed to formless. Heraclitus said you can't step in the same river twice. But he also said there is a logos, a pattern, that governs the flowing. Change isn't random chaos. It follows deep patterns, rhythms older than thought. The river changes but remains a river. You change but remain yourself. Form dissolves but pattern persists. Everything in the cosmos is in motion. Planets orbit. Stars burn and eventually die. Galaxies spin through space. At every scale, movement is constant. Nothing is truly still. Even the most solid-seeming rock is made of atoms in constant vibration. Being is always becoming. There's a peace in this recognition. You're not separate from the universal flow. You're part of it, made of the same substance, following the same patterns. The water that flows through your body has flowed through rivers and oceans and clouds. The atoms in your cells were forged in ancient stars. You're a temporary formation in the endless flow of everything. What would it mean to stop resisting this flow? To stop trying to freeze yourself in any particular form? The thoughts in your mind, they're flowing too. Let them. The sensations in your body, constantly changing. Let them. The boundary between self and world, between consciousness and unconsciousness, it's fluid, permeable. Let it be. You are happening. Right now. This moment is you becoming the next moment. No gap, no seam. Continuous transformation so smooth you don't notice it. Like the hour hand of a clock, always moving but moving so slowly you can't see the motion. In sleep, this becoming accelerates. The conscious form dissolves. The organized self softens into dreams, into deeper sleep, into pure process without content. And in the morning, you emerge again, reformed, the same pattern but renewed. Every sleep is a small death and rebirth. Every waking a new creation. The ancient philosophers weren't afraid of this constant change. They saw it as the nature of life itself. Only the dead are truly unchanging. To live is to flow, to transform, to become. And to become fully, you have to release the desperate grip on being. Let the form soften. Let the boundaries blur. Heraclitus stood by the river. Aristotle observed seeds becoming plants. Plato dreamed of eternal forms. All of them were watching the same mystery. Being and becoming. Form and flow. The persistence of pattern through endless change. And finding in that mystery not confusion but peace. Tonight, you are the river. Flowing from day into night, from waking into sleep, from form into formlessness. And the river knows where it's going. It doesn't need to be told. It doesn't need to try. It simply flows. And you can flow with it, becoming what you're becoming. No resistance. No holding. Just this endless, gentle, perfect transformation. The ancient Greeks had a word, psyche, that we translate as soul. But the original meaning was simpler, more physical. Breath. The breath of life. That which animates, which makes the difference between a living body and a corpse. Something invisible, essential, always moving. Aristotle observed that breath connects the inner world with the outer. Air from the world enters you. Air from you returns to the world. With every breath, an exchange. A merging. No clear boundary between where the world ends and you begin. The soul, like breath, is never fully inside or fully outside. It flows. The philosophers noticed how breath changes with states of being. In fear, it quickens and shallows. In peace, it deepens and slows. In sleep, it finds its own rhythm, unhurried and regular. The soul expressed through breath. Visible in this most invisible way. Present in absence. Substantial in its emptiness. Think of wind moving across water. You can't see the wind itself, only its effects. Ripples spreading, waves rising, the surface constantly responding to something invisible. The soul is like this. You can't grasp it or define it, but you can feel its movement. Its presence known by what it touches. Heraclitus spoke of the soul as fire, always transforming, but he might just as well have spoken of it as wind. Never still. Never the same twice. Moving through forms without being caught by any form. The soul that breathes you, that animates this body, this mind, these thoughts, it's not a thing that can be held or examined. It's a process. A flowing. The tide rises and falls. Twice a day, for as long as there have been oceans and a moon. No one commands it. No one controls it. It simply moves according to patterns larger than any individual will. Your breath, your soul, it moves in rhythms too. Rhythms you don't create or maintain. Rhythms that happen through you. In Plato's thinking, the soul was immortal, eternal, existing before birth and after death. But perhaps this immortality isn't about an individual essence persisting forever. Perhaps it's more like breath returning to air, like a wave dissolving back into ocean. The particular form is temporary. But what animates it? That returns to the source. Changes form but doesn't die. You're breathing now, though you may not have been paying attention to it. Each breath comes without your deciding it should come. Each breath leaves without your forcing it away. Automatic, yet responsive. Your soul breathing itself. Life living itself through you. The ancient Stoics saw the soul as pneuma, spirit, wind. They believed it pervaded everything, connecting all things in one vast breathing organism. The cosmos itself alive, inhaling and exhaling. Your breath part of that cosmic breath. Your soul a small current in the great wind that moves through all things. There's no need to understand this. No need to define soul or locate it or prove it exists. It's like trying to catch wind in your hands. The attempt misses the point. Better to simply feel it moving. Notice its effects. Let it be what it is, undefined and free. In sleep, breath takes its own course completely. Consciousness releases its light grip on the rhythm. And breath continues, deeper perhaps, slower, following patterns that belong to the body's wisdom. The soul tends itself, knows what it needs, requires no conscious direction. The tide doesn't try to be the tide. Wind doesn't try to blow. Your soul doesn't try to be. It simply is. Moving, flowing, animating without effort. And when you stop trying to control or understand it, when you simply let it be, something in you relaxes at a profound level. Aristotle wrote that the soul is the form of the body, not a separate thing inhabiting the body like a ghost in a machine, but the organizing principle, the life of the body, the breathing that makes flesh into a person. When breath stops, the soul departs, not to somewhere else, just returns to the general movement of things. Imagine your breath as wind passing through. This body is like a flute, hollow, shaped to catch the wind and turn it into something. A note, a song. The flute doesn't create the wind. The wind doesn't belong to the flute. They meet, briefly, and music happens. Then the wind moves on. Your soul, your psyche, your breath, it's passing through. It was here before you became conscious of it. It'll be here after consciousness fades tonight into sleep. And eventually, it'll move beyond this body entirely. But right now, in this moment, it's here, breathing you, being you, gentle and constant as tide, as wind, as the movement of all things. The philosophers sought to understand the soul through reason and logic. But perhaps the best understanding comes not through thinking but through feeling. The rise and fall of breath. The way life moves through you without asking permission. The simple fact of being alive, animated, ensouled. Mystery beyond words. You don't have to protect your soul or improve it or purify it. It's not yours to manage. It's more accurate to say that you belong to it. That this breathing, this life, this process that's happening, it's larger than your conscious self. You're an event in the life of the soul, not the other way around. The tide comes in. The tide goes out. The moon pulls. The water responds. Breath comes in. Breath goes out. Life pulls. The body responds. Soul manifesting as breath, as movement, as the mysterious fact of being alive. No definition captures it. No explanation contains it. As the night deepens, as your breath slows, the soul continues its work. Not work that requires effort. Work that is simply happening. Being. Becoming. Breathing the breath that connects you to every living thing. Wind moving through this particular form for a time. And when sleep comes, still breathing. Still flowing. Still soul. Let it move as it moves. Let it breathe as it breathes. The tide doesn't ask how to flow. The wind doesn't wonder which direction to blow. And your soul, your breath, your life, it doesn't need your instructions. It knows. It's always known. From before you were conscious until after consciousness fades. Soul as breath. Breath as life. Life as wind passing through. Simple. Essential. Free. Aristotle walked through gardens and observed. Everything in nature, he noticed, has a telos, an end, a purpose. The acorn's nature is to become an oak. The seed's nature is to sprout and grow. Water's nature is to flow downward. Fire's nature is to rise. Everything moving toward what it's meant to be. Everything fulfilling its nature. But what is the nature of a human being? What is our telos? Aristotle suggested it was eudaimonia, that flourishing we spoke of earlier. Living well. Actualizing our potential. Becoming what we're capable of becoming. But there's another layer to this. Another dimension often overlooked. In nature, Aristotle observed two kinds of movement: movement toward something, and movement that is complete in itself. A seed growing toward becoming a plant, that's movement toward. But a plant that has reached its full growth, that simply stands in the sun, that exists in the fullness of its nature, that's different. That's rest. Not inactivity, but completion. The cosmos itself, in Aristotle's view, moves eternally. But the source of that movement, what he called the unmoved mover, is perfectly still. Pure actuality. Nothing to become because it already is everything it can be. The ultimate rest. And all movement in the universe is, in a sense, things seeking that same rest. Seeking to fulfill their nature and arrive at completion. What if your purpose, your telos, isn't always about doing more? What if sometimes your nature calls for rest? Not as failure to act, but as fulfillment of a different kind of purpose. The purpose of restoration. The purpose of simply being. Action has its time. Rest has its time. Both natural. Both purposeful. Watch a cat in sunlight. It stretches, then settles, then rests completely. No guilt about not hunting. No anxiety about wasted time. Just pure rest, natural and complete. The cat's nature includes both the hunt and the rest afterward. Both are purpose fulfilled. Neither is more valuable than the other. Your body has a nature. Part of that nature is activity, movement, work. But another part, equally essential, is rest, sleep, restoration. The deep cellular processes that only happen when conscious action ceases. This isn't lack of purpose. This is purpose of a different kind. Purpose that looks like stillness but is actually profound activity at another level. The ancient Greeks distinguished between energia and dynamis. Energia is actuality, things being what they are. Dynamis is potentiality, things capable of becoming something else. In sleep, you're not simply potential, waiting to wake up and become actual again. Sleep itself is an actuality. Rest itself is a being, not just a becoming. Complete in itself. Aristotle wrote about contemplation as the highest activity. Not doing, but being. Pure awareness without object. The mind resting in its own nature, not straining toward anything else. This, he suggested, is what divine beings do. They don't need to act because they're already complete. They simply exist in perfect contemplation, perfect rest. You don't need to be divine to taste this. There are moments when striving stops, when purpose isn't about getting somewhere or becoming something, when your nature is fulfilled simply by being awake to this moment, or by letting even that wakefulness dissolve into sleep. Both are natural. Both are purposeful. Nature doesn't struggle against itself. The tree doesn't apologize for periods when it's not growing. In winter, growth stops, energy turns inward. The tree rests. And this rest is as much part of its nature as spring's vigorous growth. Cycles of activity and rest. Both necessary. Both good. Your nature includes cycles too. Times of energy and times of quiet. Times of engagement and times of withdrawal. These aren't opposed to your purpose. They are your purpose, unfolding in its natural rhythm. Fighting the need for rest is like a tree refusing winter. Unnatural. Exhausting. Ultimately impossible. Heraclitus, who emphasized constant change, also said that nature loves to hide. Perhaps part of nature's wisdom is knowing when to be visible and active, and when to retreat into hidden rest. Seeds rest in dark soil before they sprout. Animals hibernate through winter's hardship. Rest as a form of wisdom, as a natural response to natural conditions. Right now, your nature is calling for rest. Not because something's wrong, not because you're weak or lazy, but because rest is part of the cycle, part of the pattern, part of what it means to be a living being in a rhythmic cosmos. Day follows night. Activity follows rest. And both are good. Aristotle observed that everything in nature seeks its natural place. Earth falls downward. Fire rises upward. And when things reach their natural place, they rest. They stop moving not because something prevents them, but because they've arrived. Perhaps in this moment, you've arrived. The day's movement is complete. Your natural place is rest. The purpose of rest isn't to prepare for tomorrow's activity. That's a consequence, but not the purpose. Rest has intrinsic value. It's good in itself. When you rest, you're fulfilling your nature as completely as when you act. You're being what you are, complete, whole, at your natural endpoint. In the garden at night, plants rest. No photosynthesis, no reaching toward the sun. Just being, quietly, in darkness, fulfilling their nature. Tomorrow they'll be active again. But tonight, rest is their purpose. And they rest completely, without question, without guilt. Pure natural rest. You are also nature. Not separate from the plants, the cycles, the patterns that govern all life. When your body grows heavy, when your mind grows quiet, that's nature speaking. Your nature, calling you toward your purpose in this moment, which is rest. Deep, natural, purposeful rest. Aristotle's unmoved mover, source of all motion, is eternally at rest. Not inactive, but complete. Fully itself. Needing nothing, seeking nothing, just being. In some small way, when you rest fully, you touch that same completeness. Not becoming something, just being. Fulfilling the purpose of this moment, which is to rest, to be still, to arrive at your natural place and remain there, peaceful and complete. What is real? The question rises softly, without urgency, without demanding an answer. The ancient philosophers asked this question for centuries, and their answers multiplied, diverged, circled back on themselves. Plato said the forms were real, eternal, and perfect. Heraclitus said change was real. Parmenides said only being was real. They couldn't agree. Perhaps agreement was never the point. Reality holds itself quietly, revealing nothing definitive. You see it through your senses, but are those senses reliable? The stick looks bent in water but feels straight in your hand. Dreams feel real while you're dreaming them. What makes waking more trustworthy? The mystery isn't a problem to solve. It's more like music to listen to, a texture to experience. You're embedded in reality, made of it, surrounded by it, yet what it actually is remains somehow beyond reach. Like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. You're too close. You're too much a part of it. Socrates walked through Athens asking questions about reality. What is justice, really? What is beauty, really? And the more carefully people examined these questions, the less certain they became. The solid ground of assumed knowledge turned out to be missed. But Socrates didn't seem troubled by this. He seemed almost delighted. The mystery revealed as mystery. That was enough. At night, reality loosens its appearance of solidity. Shapes blur in darkness. Sounds become ambiguous. Is that voice you hear real or memory? The uncertainty doesn't disturb. It almost comforts. Reality can be vague, unclear, mysterious, and that's acceptable. Plato told a story about people chained in a cave, seeing only shadows on a wall. They think the shadows are reality, not knowing about the fire behind them, the objects casting the shadows, the vast world outside. But even Plato couldn't say what's outside his own cave. What casts the shadows of the forms he believed in? Mystery within mystery. Caves within caves. There's a gentleness in not knowing, in letting reality be whatever it is without needing to capture it in concepts. The moon rises. Is it a rock reflecting light, or a goddess driving her chariot? All interpretations. None quite touching the thing itself. The moon shines regardless of what you believe about it. Aristotle tried to classify reality, to organize it into categories. Substance and accident. Form and matter. His system was elegant, comprehensive, and yet reality overflowed it. Always something that didn't quite fit. Always an exception, an edge case, a mystery that resisted categorization. You could spend your whole life studying philosophy and end with more questions than you started with. The pre-Socratics wondered if everything was water, or fire, or atoms in void. Each system trying to grasp reality. Each one partial, incomplete. The mystery persisting through every attempt to dissolve it. But tonight, there's no need to attempt anything. Reality can remain mysterious. You can rest in not knowing what's ultimately real. Your experience is real enough. This breath, this moment, this gradual settling into sleep, whether it's material or spiritual or both or neither, it's happening. And that's sufficient. The skeptic suggested that we should suspend judgment about reality entirely, not because we're certain nothing can be known, but because certainty itself might be impossible. And in that suspension, in that release of the need to know, they found peace, ataraxia, tranquility through accepting uncertainty, curiosity without effort. You can wonder about reality without straining to figure it out. The wondering itself is pleasant, like watching clouds and seeing shapes without needing to decide what they really are. A dragon, a mountain, just cloud. All equally true, all equally mysterious. The cosmos stretches out beyond comprehension. Billions of stars, galaxies, distances that make the mind stumble. Is it real? In what sense? The question opens into vastness. No answer comes, only wonder. And here, in your immediate experience, the same mystery. You exist. That seems undeniable. But what are you? A body, a mind, a soul, a process. Philosophy offers many answers, none completely satisfying. The mystery of your own existence as profound as the mystery of the cosmos. Plato suggested that true knowledge is remembering what the soul knew before birth. Aristotle said knowledge comes from experience. The Stoic said wisdom is living in agreement with nature. Each school confident in its vision of reality. Each vision different. Perhaps reality is large enough to hold all of them. Or perhaps none of them quite touch it. There's something restful in this acknowledgement. You don't have to have reality figured out. Don't have to choose between competing visions. You can simply be here, in the mystery, curious but not concerned. The ancient mysteries promised revelation. But what was revealed was never spoken. Initiates were sworn to secrecy. Perhaps what they experienced couldn't be put into words. Perhaps reality reveals itself only in silence. Only when questions stop. Only when the mind softens and releases its grip on knowing. Tonight, reality is darkness and warmth and breath. Its thoughts dissolving. It's the space between waking and sleep. It's this moment, undefined and undefinable. Mysterious as it's always been. Mysterious as it will always be. And in that mystery, no threat. Only gentleness. Only the quiet invitation to stop trying to know and simply be. What is real? The question fades. Not because it's answered. Because it no longer matters. Reality holds you whether you understand it or not. The mystery continues, and you can rest in it, curious, wondering, but making no effort, letting it all be, unknown, unknowable, gently, perfectly mysterious. The stars, still turning, as they always have, as they always will. Patterns older than memory, older than Athens, older than thought itself. Circling, constant, eternal. You're here beneath them. Small, brief, but held. Held in something vast, something that doesn't ask anything of you. The cosmos moves, and you rest in its movement. Nothing required, nothing needed, just being carried along in the great turning. Time, that strange thing, moving and not moving. Night has no hours, no markers, no way to measure its passing. Just this endless now. Time dissolved, you floating in timelessness. No past pulling at you, no future calling to you. Just here, always here, suspended in the eternal present. The ancient philosophers looked up just as you might look up. Same stars, same darkness, same questions arising and fading like breath. Thousands of years between you and them, but in this moment, no distance at all. Time folded back on itself. They're here, you're here, together in the eternal now. All of us watching the same lights, feeling the same wonder. Breath, moving in, moving out. Like tide, like wind, like everything in nature that flows. Not yours to control, just happening. Life breathing itself, soul moving through this body like air through an open window. In and out, simple, endless, gentle. The body knows, has always known, will always know. The pattern continues regardless of whether you notice it. Stars wheel across the sky, time flows like water, breath moves in its rhythm. All of it without effort, without strain, without anyone directing it. The universe doing what it does. And you, part of it, not separate, never separate. Just this one process, being, unfolding, natural as rain falling. Change. Everything changing, always, in every moment. The river flowing, the form shifting, nothing staying the same. Nothing held, nothing fixed, nothing permanent. Just this gentle transformation happening everywhere at once. Waking into sleep, thought into no thought, self into nothing. All of it flowing, all of it natural, no resistance possible or needed. The cosmos breathes, you breathe. Same breath, same movement, same life force. In and out, rising and falling like waves on an endless ocean. The universe expanding and contracting, your chest rising and falling. One rhythm, one pattern, playing itself out at every scale you can imagine. From the smallest atom dancing in darkness to the largest galaxy spinning through space, one breath moves through everything. Mystery. That's what remains when all the explanations fall away. Not knowing, not needing to know, not even wanting to know. Reality being what it is, unknown, unknowable, and perfectly fine that way. And that's okay, that's good, that's exactly right. The mystery gentle, the not knowing peaceful like a deep lake at midnight. No answers needed, no questions even. Just this simple presence in the face of infinite mystery. The ancient teachers, Socrates walking through Athens, Plato in his academy, Aristotle among his students. They walked under these same stars 2,000 years ago. They breathed this same air, felt this same pull towards sleep. They felt this same dissolution as thought gives way to rest, as knowing gives way to mystery. They understood that philosophy ends here, in silence, in breath, in stars turning overhead. Stars, time, breath, mystery. All of it together, all of it one thing with different names. You can let it hold you now, let yourself be held completely. Let it all blur into softness, distinctions fading like ink in water, words fading into silence, even these thoughts fading into the darkness behind thought, into something simpler, something wordless, something that was here before language. The philosophers knew. They knew this space, this dissolution, this rest that comes at the end of thinking. After all the dialogues, after all the questioning, something simple remains. Being, just being, nothing added to it. Nothing more needed, nothing more possible, nothing to achieve or become. The night is deep now, or maybe not, maybe time has stopped having meaning. Time doesn't matter in this space. The stars turn or they don't, you can't tell anymore. Your breath continues, slow, slower, finding its own depth. Everything settling like silt through water, everything soft. Like dust falling through moonlight, like leaves landing on still ponds. Gentle, complete, finished. You're part of the pattern, the eternal pattern that preceded you and will continue after. Cycles within cycles, movement within stillness, change within changelessness. Day into night into day, breath into breath into breath, moment into moment. The wheel turning, and you turning with it. And you can rest now, finally, completely. Rest without reservation, without holding anything back. The ancient world, this world, no difference now in the darkness. All time collapsed into this single point, all space gathered into this one place. Into this one breath, this one moment of letting go completely, of releasing everything, of becoming nothing particular and everything general, of dissolving back into the source of all things. The cosmos holds you, has always held you since before you were born, will always hold you after you're gone. The stars witness your brief existence without judgment. Time carries you forward without asking permission. Breath moves through you like wind through grass. Mystery surrounds you on all sides like an ocean. And it's all okay, all good, all exactly as it should be. Turning, breathing, being, dissolving. The edges soften between you and the world. The center softens into nothing you can name. Everything soft now, everything gentle as falling snow. No more holding on to anything. No more effort to maintain or control or understand. Just this simple being here, or not even here, just being. Stars, breath, mystery, peace. All of it fading now, dissolving like morning mist, into simple darkness, simple quiet, simple rest. The cosmos continues its eternal turning, and you rest in it. Nothing to hold, nothing to be, nothing to do or think or figure out. Just this gentle, eternal, complete rest that asks nothing and gives everything. Virtue. That word again, softer now, worn smooth like a stone in water. Not something to achieve or to become. Just balance, like water finding its level. The ancient Greeks spoke of harmony. Different parts working together without struggle, without force. The way seasons follow each other naturally, the way breath finds its rhythm. Nothing pushing, nothing resisting. Just things being as they are, in balance. Courage isn't about being strong. It's about being steady, like a tree with deep roots. The wind comes, the tree bends but doesn't break. Steadiness, that's all. Not fighting the wind, just remaining rooted while it passes. Present through the storm but not destroyed by it. Justice isn't about rules or laws. It's about inner balance, about giving rest its time and activity its time. About honoring what each moment needs. Right now, this moment needs rest. And giving it rest, that's justice. That's being fair to yourself, treating yourself with the kindness you deserve. Wisdom is knowing you don't know. Simple as that. The mind can stop trying to figure everything out. Can stop grasping for answers that may not exist. Can rest in the spaciousness of not knowing. And that rest, that acceptance of mystery, that's wisdom too. Friendship with yourself. Being gentle, being present, being kind to your own experience, not judging your thoughts as they drift past like clouds, not criticizing yourself for being tired or uncertain or simply human, just being here, companionship without words, without demands. Moderation, that middle way. Not too much, not too little. Not straining forward into tomorrow, not collapsing back into yesterday. Just this gentle center where things balance naturally, where you don't have to try so hard, where effort and ease meet and blend into something that feels effortless. All of these virtues, these ways of being that the philosophers discussed, they're not separate things to master one by one. They're one thing with different names, different faces. Balance, harmony, being in tune with yourself and with the rhythms that move through everything. Like an instrument that's neither too tight nor too loose. Playing the note that wants to be played. The right note for this moment, this particular moment. And right now, the note is rest. The note is softness. The note is letting go of everything that can be let go. The philosophers spent years discussing virtue, defining it, debating it, writing dialogues about it. Pages and pages of careful thought. But underneath all the words, something simple. Be balanced. Be kind. Be present. Be at peace with what is. You don't have to do anything to be virtuous. You don't have to become someone different or better. Just allow the natural balance. Allow the harmony that emerges when you stop interfering. When you stop forcing and controlling and pushing yourself. When you simply let things be. The body knows balance. It's been finding balance since before you were conscious. When you stop telling it what to do, it finds its way. Breath evens out, muscles release their tension, thoughts slow to a gentle drift. All by itself, balance returns. Like water settling in a bowl, like dust settling after wind passes. Virtue as quiet balance. So quiet you might not notice it happening. No drama, no achievement, no victory to celebrate. Just things being in their right relationship. Rest balanced with activity. Knowing balanced with not knowing. Self-balanced with letting self dissolve into something larger. The ancient teachers would approve of this. After all the teaching, all the dialogue, all the careful thought. This simple balance, this quiet harmony. This is what they were pointing toward all along. Not complicated, not difficult. Just natural, like everything in nature finding its place and resting there. And your place right now is rest. Deep rest, complete rest. The kind of rest that comes when balance is restored. When harmony settles over everything like evening settling over a landscape. When virtue isn't something you do but something you are. Naturally, effortlessly, quietly. Balance like the stillness at the center of a turning wheel. Everything moving around it, but the center perfectly still. You can be that center. Not by trying to be it, but by releasing everything else. By allowing the natural settling. By trusting the balance that's always been there, underneath everything, waiting. The scales tip back and forth through the day. Too much of this, too little of that. Activity and rest, speaking and silence, doing and being. But at night, the scales can find their center. Rest at the balance point. Neither tipping one way nor the other. Just centered, stable, at peace. Virtue, harmony, balance, peace. All the same thing wearing different clothes. All pointing to this state of quiet rightness. Where nothing is wrong, nothing needs fixing. Where you can simply be, balanced and whole. At rest in yourself, at rest in the world, at rest in the great pattern that holds everything together. The Greeks were wise in this way. They saw that virtue isn't about struggle or self-improvement. It's about harmony, finding your natural place in the order of things. And often, that place is stillness. That place is rest. That place is here, now, balanced perfectly between waking and sleep. Let the balance hold you. You don't have to maintain it yourself. It maintains itself, has always maintained itself. Like the stars maintain their courses, like the breath maintains its rhythm. Balance is the natural state of things. You just have to stop disturbing it. Stop trying to be anything other than what you are in this moment. Quiet balance. No effort, no strain, no reaching for anything. Just settling, softening, resting into what is. The virtue of allowing things to be as they are. The harmony of accepting this moment completely. The wisdom of knowing you can stop now. Stop trying, thinking, doing anything at all. Simple balance. Like water in a bowl after it has been stirred. The movement slows, the ripples fade, the surface becomes still and mirror smooth. Reflecting the sky, reflecting the stars, reflecting everything without distortion. Clear, calm, balanced, perfect. At rest. And you, balanced now. All the parts of yourself in harmony. Mind and body, thought and feeling, knowing and not knowing. All of it together, at peace with itself. Virtue as quiet balance, finally understood. Not through thinking about it, but being it. Resting in it. Letting it be what it is. Time moves differently now. Slower, thicker, like honey pouring. Or maybe it's not moving at all. Hard to tell. Minutes could be hours, hours could be minutes. The distinction doesn't matter anymore. A thought arises. Something about tomorrow, or yesterday, or something else. It floats past like a leaf on a stream. You notice it, or you don't. Either way, it continues floating. Moving through awareness without catching on anything. The ancient philosophers spoke of time as the measure of change. But when change slows, when everything settles, time loses its grip. What is there to measure when nothing is changing? One moment blending into the next, no clear boundary. Like colors bleeding together in water. Another thought. This one about nothing in particular. Just a wisp of something, barely formed. It appears, drifts, dissolves. The way mist dissolves when sun touches it. Here and then not here. And you, watching or not watching, it makes no difference. Heraclitus said everything flows. The river always moving. But at night, the flow becomes so gentle you can barely feel it. You're floating in the river of time or the river of thought. Just floating, drifting, carried by something you don't need to understand. Time stretches. A single breath might last forever, or forever might pass in a single breath. The usual markers are gone. No clock ticking, no schedule. Just this endless now, expanding in all directions. Spacious, open, free. Thoughts continue their gentle parade. One about something you did today. One about someone you know, their face barely forming before it fades. One that's just a feeling without words. They move through like fish through dark water, visible for a moment, then gone. Plato imagined eternity as unchanging, perfect, complete. Maybe you're touching that now. Not thinking about it, just experiencing it. The place where time doesn't rule, where thoughts don't stick. Everything flowing but nothing really changing. Slow, so slow now. Your breath barely moving. Your thoughts barely forming. Time barely passing, or passing so completely you've moved beyond it. Some other dimension where clocks have no meaning. A memory floats by. Something from long ago, surfacing for no reason. You don't reach for it. Don't try to hold it. Just let it pass like everything else is passing. Aristotle studied motion, the way things move from potential to actual. But here, now, there's no motion toward anything. No becoming, just being. Or maybe not even being. Just this drifting state between states. Suspended, floating. The thoughts get simpler now. Less formed. More like impressions than ideas. A color without a name. A sensation without a location. A fragment of something that never quite becomes whole. And that's fine. They don't need to be whole. Time pools around you like still water, deep and quiet, barely moving. You're submerged in it, but you can breathe. It holds you without weight. And in this timeless water, thoughts float by like bubbles, rising from somewhere deep, drifting upward, disappearing at the surface. The philosophers wondered about time. Is it real or illusion? Questions that seem so distant now, so unnecessary. Time is simply this. This slowing, this softening, this dissolution. Another thought, so faint you almost miss it. Something about rest, about peace. But even that thought is floating away now. Even the thought of letting go is being let go. Everything releasing, everything drifting. The night deepens, or stays the same, or lightens. You can't tell which and don't need to know. Time has become a single continuous moment, stretched so thin you can see through it, or compressed so densely that nothing can move. Either way, you're here, suspended, floating. Thoughts like clouds in a dark sky, barely visible, barely there, drifting across the empty space of awareness. The sky doesn't grasp at them, just lets them move through, silent and free. So slow now, everything slowed to almost nothing. Breath like the tide. Thoughts like stars appearing, one by one so gradually you don't notice. Time like molasses, like honey, holding ancient things perfectly still. The ancient world knew this state. Philosophers lying awake in the deep hours, feeling time stretch and soften, watching thoughts float past like nightbirds, silent wings in darkness, moving without sound. You don't have to track any of this, don't have to follow the thoughts or measure the time. It all happens by itself. The floating, the drifting, the gentle dissolution. You're just here, or not quite here, somewhere between. Suspended in the slow time of night. A thought about the stars, maybe. Or about rest. Or about nothing at all. It barely forms before it's dissolving. Like salt in water. There and then not there. Time almost stopped now. Or moving so slowly that each moment contains everything. Past and future collapsed into this one eternal present, and thoughts floating through it like pollen on wind. So light, so unattached, drifting wherever the current takes them. The philosophers understood that thinking isn't always active, deliberate. Sometimes it's just this, passive, receptive, open. Thoughts arising from nowhere, returning to nowhere. The mind like a clear pool, reflecting whatever passes. All of it reflected and released. Slow floating time. Gentle floating thoughts. Nothing to catch, nothing to keep. Just this drifting through the dark. This being carried by something larger. This letting time and thought and self all float together. All dissolve together. In the slow endless now. A question forms. Not from anyone in particular. Just a question arising in the space between waking and sleep. What is good? No one asks it, yet it's there, floating like everything else floats. And an answer comes, or something like an answer. Not from a voice, not from a teacher. Just arising, the way morning arises. Good is harmony, balance, rest. The words appear and dissolve. No one speaking, no one listening. Just dialogue happening by itself. Socrates once walked through Athens asking questions. But at night, the questions ask themselves. They don't need a questioner. They drift through awareness like everything else. What is courage? What is wisdom? And the answers drift back. Courage is steadiness. Wisdom is not knowing. All of it happening without anyone there. The dialogue continues, has always been continuing. An ancient conversation that no one started and no one will finish. Philosophy as a river flowing through time. You can step into it, or the river can flow through you. Either way, the dialogue goes on. Questions and answers exchanging places. Another question arrives from nowhere. Why rest? And something responds, gentle as breath. Because rest is natural. Because the cosmos itself rests in its motion. The dialogue soft, almost inaudible. Like voices heard from far away, across water. Plato wrote dialogues between people. Socrates and his students, exchanging ideas. But the deepest dialogue, he might have said, is the one the soul has with itself. No words needed. Just thoughts meeting thoughts. Understanding arising without explanation. What is real? The question floats past. And reality answers without speaking. This breath is real. This darkness is real. But the answer is also a question. What is real? And so the dialogue circles, complete and endless. In the ancient academy, students would debate philosophy, voices rising and falling. But beneath the debate, another conversation. Silent, wordless. The conversation everything has with everything else. Stars with darkness. Breath with body. Thought with silence. A statement appears. All things flow. And another responds. Yet patterns remain. Back and forth. But no one is speaking. The dialogue is happening in the space where you might be. Or where you once were. Thoughts conversing with themselves. What is the soul? Breath, comes the wordless answer. Wind moving through. And immediately another voice. The soul is what knows. And another. The soul is what rests. All the answers true, all the answers false. The dialogue weaving them together. Aristotle taught while walking. Words exchanged in movement. But now, stillness. And the dialogue continues anyway. Motion and stillness conversing. Becoming and being exchanging views. All without anyone there to hear. The questions grow softer. Less like questions. More like gentle observations. Everything changes. Yes, everything changes. Nothing can be held. No, nothing can be held. Agreement without effort. Understanding without proof. Ancient voices blend with silence. Socrates asking. Plato answering. Aristotle clarifying. But the voices are indistinguishable now. Just philosophy speaking to itself. Just wisdom circulating through the darkness. Just dialogue without anyone dialoguing. What remains when striving ends? Peace remains. What remains when knowing ends? Mystery remains. What remains when self dissolves? Everything remains. The conversation of existence with itself. No beginning, no end. Just this ongoing exchange. Heraclitus said you can't step in the same river twice. And someone responds, was it Heraclitus or the river? Both or neither. The dialogue erasing distinctions. Making everything part of one conversation. One flowing exchange. Questions without question marks. Answers without periods. Just words and impressions floating. Mixing together like streams joining. The dialogue becoming less distinct. Less like conversation, more like whisper. More like wind through leaves. What is virtue? Someone asked that once. Someone always asks that. and someone always answers. Balance, harmony, rest. But now the question and answer are one thing. The asking is the answering. Dialogue collapsing into unity. In the Lyceum, in the Academy, in the Agora. Voices once filled those spaces with philosophy. Now those spaces are silent. But the dialogue continues. In the silence, between the breaths, beneath the thoughts. Philosophy speaking to no one. The conversation winds down, or winds up, or stays exactly as it is. What is the good life? This comes the answer. This silence, this rest, this letting go. And the question, satisfied, dissolves. Speakers fade into the words they speak. Words fade into meanings. Meanings fade into feelings. Feelings fade into pure awareness. And awareness fades into what? The dialogue trails off. No conclusion needed. Ancient philosophers, modern minds, all engaged in the same conversation. About truth, about existence. But at night, the conversation needs no participants. It happens in the space between things. In the pause between heartbeats. Dialogue without speakers, perfect and complete. What was the question? Already forgotten. What was the answer? Already gone. Only the dialogue remains. Only this gentle back and forth of nothing, of everything, of the mind speaking softly to itself, until even speaking stops. Socrates walks through Athens, but Athens is gone. Plato teaches in the Academy, but the Academy is empty. Yet the dialogue continues. Their questions your questions. Their wondering your wondering. All of it one conversation. Timeless, speakless, perfect. And now, even the dialogue is quiet. Just faint echoes. Just distant murmurs. Just the memory of words that were never really spoken. Philosophy dissolving into silence. Questions dissolving into peace. The whole conversation settling into rest. There's a listening happening. Not with ears, not through sound. Not with attention that focuses. Just a kind of openness. A space where things can arrive and depart freely. Listening without effort, without intention. The ancient philosophers were listeners first, not just to each other's words, but to something deeper, something wordless. The way you might listen to the ocean. Not for anything in particular. Just listening to the sound, the rhythm. Right now, that same listening. Not listening for anything specific. Just listening, just being open. The way the night listens to itself. The way darkness receives everything without grasping. Open, empty, receptive. Socrates would listen to people until they discovered their own understanding. His listening was active, guiding. But this listening now, it's different, softer, passive, like soil receiving rain. Nothing doing the listening. Just listening happening by itself. What arrives in this listening? Maybe the sound of breath, barely audible. Maybe a distant sound. Maybe just silence, thick and full. All of it received without judgment, without naming. Just heard, or felt, or somehow known. Plato believed the soul could hear eternal truths. Not through physical ears, but through some inner sense. Perhaps this is that sense opening. This wordless listening. This being open to what is. The listening has no object. It's not listening to something. It's just the state of being open. Like a clear pool reflecting sky. The pool doesn't try to reflect. It's simply clear, still, and the reflection happens by itself. In the schools of Athens, students learned to listen to their teacher's words. But the deepest teaching comes without words. It arrives in silence, in gaps between speaking, in the space between thoughts, when the mind is simply open. This listening is effortless, takes no energy, requires no focus. It's already happening right now, has always been happening, like the earth listening to the sun, like water listening to the moon, a natural receiving. Aristotle observed the world carefully, watching, noting. But there's another kind of observation, without analysis, without categorizing, just pure awareness, just this listening presence, that witnesses without recording. The silence speaks in its own way, not in words, but in some language older than words, the language of presence, of simple being. And this listening understands somehow, doesn't translate it into thoughts, just knows it directly. What is this listening hearing? Maybe nothing at all that can be named. Maybe everything at once. The cosmicum beneath all sound. The silence that contains all sounds. All of it arriving in this wordless listening. The ancient mysteries promised direct knowledge, not learned from books or teachers, but received in silence. Perhaps this is that knowledge emerging. This listening that understands without concepts. Listening to the darkness around you. Listening to the stillness between sounds. Listening to the space between heartbeats. Not hearing anything particular. Just being present to what is. Present without trying. Heraclitus said nature loves to hide. But perhaps nature reveals itself to this kind of listening. Not to the analyzing mind, but to pure receptivity. To the awareness that doesn't grasp, that simply is, that simply receives. The listening deepens. Or maybe it was always this deep. You're just noticing it now. Or not even noticing. Just being it. Being this openness. Being this receptive silence. No effort to understand what arrives. No need to interpret. Just listening without words. Without thoughts about what you're hearing. Just the bare fact of being aware. Of being this listening itself. In meditation, in prayer, in contemplation. Different traditions, same discovery. That beneath the thinking mind. There's this listening always present. This pure awareness. This openness that's always been here. The philosophers sought wisdom through reason. But perhaps wisdom is ultimately this. This listening without agenda. This being open to what is. This receiving without judgment. Not something you achieve. Something you already are. Listen to the breath, or don't. Listen to the silence, or don't. The listening continues regardless. It's not something you do. It's what remains when doing stops. When trying stops. Wordless listening. Soundless hearing. The awareness that has no object. Just awareness itself. Empty. Full of everything. Holding everything. Holding nothing. Just this openness. The ancient world knew this listening. In temples, in sacred groves. Philosophers and mystics finding the same silence. The same listening space. Where wisdom isn't learned, but received directly. And now, that listening is here. You're not doing it. It's doing itself. Just being present. This open space that you are. This receptive silence. This listening without words. What arrives doesn't matter. Thoughts, sounds, sensations. All of it received equally. All of it passing through. Like wind through empty space. Nothing holding. Nothing pushing away. Socrates said to know yourself. But how do you know what you are? Perhaps through this listening. This turning awareness toward itself. Not to understand. Just to be present. The listening is complete. Needs nothing added. perfect in its simplicity. This open awareness, this wordless knowing, this silent presence, receiving everything, holding nothing, free, and in this listening without words, philosophy comes to its end. Questions dissolve. Even the listener ends. Only listening remains. Only this presence, this wordless, silent, open, space. You're safe here, completely safe, held by something larger than yourself, something that asks nothing in return. The night surrounds you like a soft blanket, warm and gentle and infinite. All the thinking is done now, all the questions asked and released, all the wondering complete and finished. What remains is simply this quiet resting in the present moment, this letting go of everything that can be let go, and discovering that everything can be let go, that nothing needs to be held. The ancient voices have faded into silence. Their words dissolved like mist in morning sun, like smoke in wind. But something of their peace remains with you. Something of their understanding has settled into you. The understanding that rest is natural, necessary, good. That you don't have to earn it or deserve it through effort. It's simply here, waiting, always waiting for you to accept it. Your body knows what to do. It's been carrying you all day, all your life, through everything. And now it can rest fully. Muscles releasing their tension, letting go of all the holding. Breath finding its deepest rhythm, its most natural flow. Everything settling into its natural place like water finding its level. Nothing forced, nothing strained, nothing effortful. Just this gentle returning to stillness, to peace. You don't need to be anyone right now. Don't need to maintain any image or meet any expectation. Don't need to be strong or capable or anything at all. You can simply be here, formless and free, letting yourself dissolve into the darkness that surrounds you, into the warmth that holds you, into the safety of this moment that asks nothing. The night is deep and quiet around you, holding you the way water holds a boat, effortlessly, supporting without effort, cradling without grasping or demanding. You can trust this holding completely, can surrender to it without reservation. Let it take all the weight you've been carrying, all the burden you've been holding. Let it all go into the darkness. Nothing is required of you now. No task waiting, no duty calling, no obligation pulling. This time is yours alone, completely yours. For resting, for releasing, for simply being. And in this being, finding a peace that doesn't depend on anything. That's just here, has always been here beneath everything else, waiting for you to notice it, to sink into it. The thoughts that troubled you earlier, they're distant now, like lights from a far shore seen across dark water, visible perhaps, but too far away to matter. They can't reach you here in this protected space, here in this safe space, this resting place between worlds, where nothing can disturb you or demand your attention, where everything is gentle and slow and peaceful. Breath moves through you like a tide, steady and sure, in and out, natural and easy. Each breath carrying you deeper into rest, deeper into peace, deeper into the safety, deeper into the quiet that's always been waiting for you, at the center of everything that exists, at the center of you, underneath everything. You've done enough today. More than enough, always more than enough. Whatever the day required, you gave it fully, and now you can release it completely. Let it go without holding anything back. Let it drift away into the past where it belongs now, where it can rest too, while you remain here, present, at rest in this moment. The darkness is friendly and kind, not empty but full of everything you need, full of peace, full of rest, full of safety and warmth. It holds you without touching you, without demanding, surrounds you without confining you or limiting you, just present, just here with you, like it's always been, like it always will be, constant and reliable and safe. Your mind can be quiet now, finally quiet. Doesn't need to solve or figure or plan anything. Doesn't need to remember or anticipate or prepare. Can simply rest in not knowing, in the freedom of that. In not doing, in being rather than becoming. In the spaciousness of having nothing to accomplish. Nothing to prove to anyone. Nothing to be except this simple presence. This gentle awareness that's fading. Softening into sleep. Everything is as it should be right now. The world continues without needing your attention or guidance. The night unfolds in its own rhythm, perfect and complete. And you can let go of holding everything together. Let go of vigilance, of watching, of managing. Let go of control and the illusion of control. Trust that everything will be there when you wake. If you need it, if you want it. But for now, none of it matters. For now, only this matters, only this moment. This rest that you're entering. This peace that surrounds you. This gentle descent into sleep, so natural and easy. Where nothing troubles you or disturbs you. Where nothing demands anything from you. Where you can finally, completely, without reservation, rest. You're safe in every way. You're held by something infinitely larger and kinder. You can let go now, completely let go. Let go of everything you've been holding. And rest in a way you've never rested before. Deep rest that goes all the way through you. Complete rest that leaves nothing untouched. Perfect rest that restores everything. The ancient wisdom, all those words and ideas and philosophies, they were only pointing here, always pointing to this moment of surrender, this peace beyond understanding, this simple rest beneath all complexity. And now you've arrived at last. You can stay here as long as you need, as long as you want, forever if you wish. Safe and held, safe in the darkness, held in the silence, at peace in the stillness, resting in the gentle night, surrounded by peace, cradled by the infinite, nothing to fear anywhere, nothing to do or be, just this rest, this gentle, profound rest, this soft, complete surrender, this safe, perfect peace, this rest that has no end, everything dissolving now, everything softening, everything safe, everything rest. The stars turn, as they always have. The cosmos moves in its patterns, eternal and ordered, unchanging in their change. You rest beneath them, part of the pattern, part of the whole, small and brief, but held. The philosophers understood that all things seek their natural place, and rest is your natural place now, the place you've been moving toward, all day, all your life, breath like the tide, rising and falling, the rhythm of nature moving through you, in and out, slow and slower. Aristotle observed that rest is completion, not lack of purpose, but purpose fulfilled, the acorn becoming the oak, and then resting in what it has become. The night holds everything, as it held ancient Athens, as it holds all things, without effort, without strain, time dissolved, past and future gone, only the eternal now remaining, spacious and still, Plato's forms, beyond time, beyond change, and here, touching eternity, in this timeless rest, soul as breath, breath as soul, moving so gently now, almost imperceptible, wind through an empty flute, Heraclitus knew, Everything flows, even as you flow towards sleep, natural as rivers to the sea. Nothing forced, nothing resisted. The examined life, softening now, questions fading, only being remains. Simple and complete. Socrates in the night, also resting, also releasing. The dialogue complete, the questions quiet. Virtue as balance, found here, in this stillness, in this gentle center, where all parts are at peace. The cosmos breathing, you breathing, one breath, one rhythm, from the smallest particle to the largest galaxy, mystery everywhere, reality unknowable. And that's perfect. That's peace. The not knowing, itself a kind of knowing. Friendship with the darkness, with the silence, with yourself. Companionship without words, presence without demands. All the ancient wisdom, pointing here, to this rest, to this peace. This was always the destination. The philosophers sleep too, in their time, in their way, and their thoughts remain, floating in the eternal, available to all who listen, being and becoming, merging now, as you become sleep, as sleep becomes you, the boundary dissolving, the unmoved mover, perfectly still, and you approaching that stillness, that completion, that final rest. No striving needed, nature taking its course, as it always does, effortlessly, inevitably. The pattern holds you, the eternal pattern, cycles within cycles, rest within rest, safe in the great weaving. Athens sleeps, the academy quiet, the Lyceum dark, philosophy resting in the night, and rising again, in each new seeker. And you, part of that ancient rest, connected across time, to all who have sought wisdom, and found it ends here, in letting go, in surrendering to what is. Logos, the pattern beneath everything, carrying you now, effortlessly, toward sleep, toward restoration. The soul knows, has always known, how to return to its source, to rest, without needing instruction. Eudaimonia, flourishing, found in this moment, this perfect rest, not in doing, but in being. Harmonia, all parts in balance, nothing struggling, nothing straining, just the natural order, restored, the night infinite, the peace infinite, the wisdom infinite, all of it here, all of it now, everything the philosophers taught, dissolving into this simple being, simple rest, the complexity falling away, leaving only essence, safe in the cosmos, held by the pattern, cradled by eternity, as all things are held, as all things have always been held. Breath barely moving, soul barely distinct, from the darkness, from the whole, the boundaries fading, nothing to examine, nothing to know, nothing to do, the work complete, the day finished, the good life, found here, in this rest, in this surrender, to what is natural, what is right, time and eternity, collapsed into one, this moment outside moments, where all philosophy points, stars witnessing, as they witnessed Socrates, as they witness all things, indifferent and perfect, eternal guardians of the night. You rest, deep rest, complete rest, natural rest, the rest your body has always known how to find, the ancient wisdom fulfilled, in this letting go, in this peace, nothing more needed. nothing more possible. Safe, held, complete, by forces larger than understanding, older than thought, philosophy's end, and its beginning, here in silence, here in rest, where words dissolve, and truth remains, all questions answered, by not answering, by dissolving into the darkness, into the peace, the forms eternal, and you touching them, in this formless rest, beyond name, beyond concept, breath, so quiet, so gentle, like whispers in vast space, like wind over ancient stones, being, just being, nothing more, nothing less, complete in its simplicity. The philosophers approve. This is what they meant. This peace, this rest, this return to the source, everything soft, everything still, everything complete, as it was always meant to be, darkness kind, silence full, peace eternal, wrapping around you, holding you safe, held by the night, held by the cosmos, held by the pattern, now and always. And so the ancient philosophers bid you rest, their voices fading into the darkness they once contemplated, their questions dissolving into the peace they sought. They have walked with you through this night, through these thoughts, through this gentle descent, and now they step back, returning to their eternal sleep, leaving you to yours, safe in the knowledge they discovered. That rest is natural, that peace is your birthright, that the examined life leads here, to this surrender, to this trust, to this perfect, complete, eternal rest. Rest, 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 safe, 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 peace, peace, peace. The night continues. The philosophers rest, and so do you, forever held, forever safe, forever at peace.